The hot afternoon sun bore down on the neat rows of clapboard houses lined along Oak Avenue, a serene suburban street in an unassuming American town. Henry Bolton, a retired Air Force sergeant with years of service carved into the lines of his face and the rigidity of his stance, paused on the sidewalk. He had stopped to readjust an unwieldy package that held something much more precious than its tattered wrapping suggested. Inside lay a photograph of his late wife, a picture that had traveled with him to countless foreign lands, his quiet anchor through the turmoil of military life. But this afternoon, as Henry stood minding his own business, rifling in his pocket for his house keys, unaware of the predator's gaze homing in on him, Officer Carter, known around the block for his hawkish presence, slowed his patrol car to a crawl. Carter's eyes, hidden behind mirrored sunglasses that seemed designed to deflect humanity, settled suspiciously on Henry. A black man in a predominantly white neighborhood, Carter's biases did the math. The cruiser pulled up alongside, and Carter stepped out with calculated nonchalance, hand resting on the baton strapped to his hip. "Hey there, got a minute?" His voice was low, as innocuous as the steel trap beneath a thin layer of leaves. Henry turned slowly, surprise flickering across his face like a breeze over water, smoothing it back into impassivity. Despite the heat, a chill washed over him, a well-learned caution from living within the crosshairs of prejudice. "Yes, officer, what can I do for you?" he replied, keeping his voice steady, respectful, hard-earned threads of training and temperament woven into his composed demeanor. Carter's lips twisted into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Got a report about a suspicious figure around here. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Henry raised an eyebrow, a counter to the boiling adrenaline beneath his skin. "Suspicious, you say? I live here, officer. Perhaps there's a misunderstanding." A pause, heavy like the air before a thunderstorm. Carter shifted, scanned the tree line where stoic neighborhood faces peered through parted curtains. No witnesses bold enough to step forward, just shadows avoiding sunlight. "I'm gonna need to see some ID," Carter insisted, the conciliatory tone slipping as authority's edge hardened into command. In that moment, time fractured. Henry, who had soared the skies maintaining peace against foreign foes, now found himself confronting an adversary born from his own soil. He dug out his wallet, hands deliberately slow, his military ID presented like a peace offering on a battlefield that promised no victor. Carter snatched it with feigned casualness, but his veneer cracked as he read the ID. A flicker of recognition, doubt, then dismissiveness wiped across his features. "Why don't you just step over here, keep everything smooth and easy?" But Henry remained rooted, unyielded by the simmering suffocation of past injustices replaying through his mind, a loop where dignity wrestled with degradation. As Carter moved closer, an involuntary twitch in his grip brushed against the photograph in Henry's possession, the fragile frame tumbling onto the pavement, glass shattering, spilling memories onto cold stone. "Shit," Henry breathed, kneeling instinctively to gather the pieces, each shard slicing through frail film, each crack eliciting a stab deeper than any blade. It was then Henry dared to whisper, not with anger, but with the heaviness of disappointment. "This is all I have left," Carter faltered, caught between the allure of power and an unexpected pang of humanity. But the crowd amassing behind the windows demanded a conclusion to their drama, a spectacle woven from threads of everyday racism. Authority needed to be exercised. "You need to come with me, sir," Carter said, voice now stripped of any pretense of politeness. Henry's eyes met Carter's gaze directly, quiet defiance simmering in their depths. "How many more times will this happen, officer? How many more times will you have to confront someone you don't understand before you start seeing them for who they are?" It was a line drawn, not merely on the dusty road of Oak Avenue, but through the history steeped in ancient prejudices, one man's silent protest against the weight of systemic oppression. As Carter reached for his handcuffs, Henry stood up, a pillar of resilience amidst the teetering morality surrounding him. Somewhere, amidst the the flickering shadows, someone reached for their phone, a digital eye capturing a moment where bravery and bias collided in the unyielding sunlight, an image that would soon travel beyond this quiet street. In the tense silence, the unspoken echoed loudest. Injustice had yet again ignored character over color. And although Henry's civility stood steadfast against malice, the question lingered. Would truth prevail in a world that often whispered lies? Do you see this moment? Leave a comment below to share where you stand. As the sun continued its relentless assault on Oak Avenue, a quiet storm brewed within Henry's mind. He stood firm, legacy wrapped around his heart like a protective shroud. Memories layered his thoughts. Snapshots of his past that ricocheted against the present injustice, the furious clang of machine gun fire, the smell of jet fuel mixed with acrid desert sand, and the camaraderie of voices that filled his ears with laughter and sorrow echoed within him. The years he spent in service, carving honor from adversity, replayed like old film in a theater only he occupied. He couldn't help but smile briefly, recalling the sharp wit and gentle warmth of fellow aviators who'd become family, uniforms starched with respect, their creases as sharp as the men who wore them, united across planes, races, and backgrounds in a singular pursuit of freedom. These were the memories worth holding on to, not just names and ranks, but stories that survived beyond the confines of service. Henry's fingers unconsciously traced the faint, discolored patch on his right shoulder, a souvenir from a fracture that nearly cost him his career. It had happened in the mountains of Afghanistan, where treacherous winds clashed with unyielding Afghan valleys. His helicopter spun out of control amidst a torrent of gunfire, and he crash-landed the bird, emerging with ribs fractured but spirit intact. The pain was a badge of survival, a reminder of resilience amidst chaos. Those years of hardship and triumph seemed distant, like echoes lost in a canyon. Yet they indelibly shaped him. A portrait of Jacqueline, his partner in all things, rested on his living room mantel, smiling through time's glass. Her laughter had anchored him through the darkest of nights. Together, they'd raised a son, Andre, who followed in his footsteps of service, climbing even higher, now a general revered and respected for his wisdom and leadership across the Air Force. The pride swelling in Henry's chest was tempered only by the bittersweet longing for Jacqueline, whose spirit he envisioned dancing among the stars. Days like today punctuated his journey, pricking at woven armor with the needle of everyday racism. Here, on what was supposed to be familiar ground, his military accolades bore no weight against the color of his skin, an invisible barrier he'd fought against for half a century. Yet Henry was no stranger to systemic injustice. He had marched through the upheaval of the civil rights movement, wary but invincible, clutching Andre's tiny hands amidst shouts for equality, demands that reverberated across the ages. The battlefields back home were no less daunting than those overseas. Amid the mounting tension, a throaty engine hum jolted him back into the present, breaking the reverie of his introspection. A car pulled up, sleek and black, weaving through the tableau of muted suburbia. Windows rolled down, revealing a face Henry knew as well as his own, Andre Bolton, backlit by the life he'd built through dedication and sacrifice. His broad shoulders and steely gaze, so reminiscent of Jacqueline's, exuded authority and commanded immediate respect. The spectators' murmurs trembled, momentarily rising above the stagnant air as recognition flickered among the assembly. Andre stepped out, uniform crisp like a flag unfurling its glory. The emblems upon his chest spoke volumes, an anthology of service and valor. He regarded his father with a nod, warmth restrained behind a professional facade. Henry stood taller, a rare twinkle in his eye. Past met future at that very moment. "Is there a problem here, officer?" Andre's voice was deep, resonant with the accumulated weight and authority endowed by his rank. It wasn't just a query, it was a call for accountability. Carter blinked, like a deer caught in high beams, the commanding presence confounding his narrative. He swallowed hard, feeling the ground beneath his feet shift. Where he had seen weakness, strength now stood, amplified and undeniable. "No, sir," Carter replied, stammering slightly. his former bravado diminished. "Just routine business." Andre shifted his gaze to his father, the silent exchange between them momentarily turning the air electric, like the pause before a storm. The elder Bolton nodded slightly, tacit communication that acknowledged lessons passed from father to son, the generational legacy upheld through turmoil. "Very well then, officer," Andre continued, his tone unwavering. "I suggest we let my father return home. He's done nothing wrong, and he's earned his rest." The words underlined with subtle authority that promised consequences if ignored. Carter, caught between the unyielding facade of systemic expectations and an unforeseen power dynamic, nodded mechanically. "Of course, General," his sunken voice trailed. The cuffs remained holstered, dignity unshackled, for now. Andre placed a hand on his father's arm, a single gesture steeped in reverence and unspoken promises. Together they turned, leaving Carter alone amidst the ripples of reality, altering his self-imposed precinct. This wasn't merely a confrontation, it was a threshold, passed by those who refused to remain silent. A message scripted not just in bold headlines, but in the steady march of progress's small defiant steps. And as they walked away, side by side, the moment imprinted itself into the communal consciousness, a testament to enduring battles yet to come. How do you remember Henry and Andre's journey? Comment below your thoughts on this generational tale. The evening descended on the town with an uneasy calm, as chronicles of the day began their journey across electronic circuits, igniting screens of smartphones and laptops with threads of injustice. Word spread with the effortless speed of outrage, blazing through neighborhoods and igniting conversations fraught with racial tension, solidarity, and the echo of change. Henry sat in his living room, the pieces of his broken photograph now reassembled with care, symbolizing a life scarred but not shattered. Andre had stayed with him after the incident, the two of them finding solace in each other's presence as they navigated the aftermath. That night, the local chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, convened an emergency session. The room was packed to capacity with community members, activists, and concerned citizens wearing determination like armor. It was as though each person carried a piece of Henry's experience with them, the collective weight demanding justice. Andrea Simmons, a formidable lawyer with an incisive mind and a steely resolve that matched her wizened gaze, addressed the assembly with poise and purpose. She had fought many battles in the court of law, often securing victories not just for her clients, but for the ideals she cherished deeply. Tonight, her voice would resonate with the gravity of her intentions. "This isn't just Henry Bolton's fight," Andrea declared, her words slicing through the low hum of anticipation. "This is our fight. What happened today is not an isolated incident. It's a part of a systemic issue that's been plaguing our society for too long." A murmur of assent rippled through the room, heads nodding in agreement as their collective spirit galvanized. Henry and Andre sat in the front row, absorbing the shared conviction like a balm to their bruised souls. "We will take legal action," Andrea continued, her gaze fixed on Henry for strength. "We have grounds for a civil complaint against Officer Carter and the police department for racial profiling and misconduct. This community demands an official apology and reform within our law enforcement." Applause followed her proclamation, starting tentatively but growing with fervor as hope threaded itself through the reinforcement of community bonds. Fists raised, signaling a struggle that extended beyond the room, beyond the town itself. The legal proceedings set in motion that very night. Petitions circulated, collecting signatures like raindrops in a growing storm. Andrea, fueled by the community's resolve, filed the necessary documentation with precision, channeling the collective outrage into calculated action. As the evening waned into night, Henry and Andre returned to the quietude of their home. The moonlit silence, punctuated by distant city noise, stood in contrast to the fervor of the meeting, offering solace in its stillness. "You've always taught me to stand up, Dad," Andre said, breaking the hush, his voice resonant with gratitude and shared strength. "You've shown me resilience, and now everyone else sees it too." Henry's smile was gentle, infused with pride and humility, attributes honed over decades of service and sacrifice. "It's never just one battle, Andre. It's the sum of all our choices, our actions, that shape the world." Their words floated on the air between them, binding them in inextricable unity and perseverance. They spoke not only of blood ties, but of the bonds forged by mutual respect and a shared history of overcoming. News anchors soon carried the story beyond local borders, the incident spiraling into a narrative larger than Oak Avenue could contain. The involvement of a high-ranking military official lent credence and urgency, demanding attention from media outlets nationwide. They pieced together the tale, juxtaposing Henry's commendable military career against the glaring prejudice he faced. A retired veteran confronted by systemic ignorance, an irony not lost on audiences glued to their screens. The public discourse around Henry's situation became a touchstone, sparking debates on local and national levels. Activists rallied behind the cause, their social media platforms ablaze with calls for accountability and reform. The noise drew eyes and ears previously turned away, compelling engagement with issues far more complex than they seemed. Meanwhile, Andrea prepared her legal stratagem with meticulous care, each document a brick in the wall she intended to erect against discrimination. Local politicians, sensing the community's pulse, took to public platforms, driven by a mixture of genuine concern and political expediency, to call for an internal review of the police department's practices. The ripple effect was unmistakable, a testament to the power of small actions, chained together in formidable opposition to intolerance. The wheels of justice, however deliberate their pace, had begun to turn, propelled by the collective will of those determined to right the wrongs long endured. Through it all, Henry remained a quiet focal point, the steady flame illuminating pathways untraveled. His story had become a beacon, a single narrative woven into the larger saga of those who dared challenge the darkness. He was not alone. In him, every heart and voice unified with the belief that change, though arduous, was not beyond reach. As court dates were set and the town braced for legal and social upheaval, Henry stood at the threshold of a new chapter, one defined not by the shadows of discrimination, but by the relentless light of communal and personal triumph. What chapters have you written in the battle against injustice? Share your journey in the comments below. Oak Avenue awoke the next morning under a different light, one cast not merely by the sun, but by the simmering awareness ignited the prior day. The morning paper featured a headline with Henry Bolton's story, his silent resilience now a narrative shared and dissected over breakfast tables across the town and beyond. Henry stood by his small kitchen window, the paper in one hand, a fresh cup of coffee in the other. The aroma rose like an offering to the gods of routine, grounding him in the familiar amidst the din of upheaval. Beside him, Andre, normally preoccupied with base operations and strategic reports, now juggled headlines and societal shifts. It hadn't taken long for the story to catch fire across military channels, discussions buzzing with the dual focus of administrative protocol and personal involvement. Andre's phone buzzed incessantly on the countertop, the screen alight with messages, some from colleagues offering quiet support, others seeking clarity on a story that had drawn unexpected attention. The Air Force, though a uniform mechanism, rallied with personal loyalty, every message a testament to respect earned and sustained through years of diligent service. "You're aware we could leverage some military resources here, right?" Andre suggested, his voice measured, eyes scanning the latest batch of emails. "If we play our cards right, this could shift perceptions even faster." Henry smirked, noting the impatience lacing his son's tone. "Yes, we could," he replied, gaze sweeping over the pages. "But this isn't just about pulling strings. It's about setting a precedent, fighting in the open so others don't have to." Andre nodded, absorbing the wisdom hard-earned through experience, a lesson in patience and strategy crowned with quiet dignity, the true marks of leadership. Later that day, the subtle undercurrents of anticipation shifted as Olivia Carmichael, a seasoned journalist whose investigative prowess was matched only by her empathy, arrived at Henry's doorstep. Her work was known not only for breaking critical stories, but for painting them with the shades of humanity so often overlooked. "Mr. Bolton," she began with warmth, eyes reflecting the depth of understanding, "I'd like to talk with you about your experiences, if you're willing. Your story is resonating so widely, and rightfully so. Sharing more of your journey might truly make a difference." Henry considered her offer, realizing the power harnessed by words shared publicly. His voice, once restricted to cockpit radios and hollers across the tarmac, now held the potential to resound far and wide, beyond the confines of personal battles, to touch unknown lives. "All right," he agreed after a brief silence spent in deliberation. "Let's sit down for a chat." The two settled in the modest living room, walls lined with memorabilia, photographs capturing missions past, a visual lineage of service. As Henry began recounting his journey, how the armed forces had given him purpose, the opportunities to rise through ranks despite the barriers of era and birthright, Olivia scribbled furiously, capturing not just facts, but the poignant humanity within them. "I've navigated numerous challenges, both in and out of service," Henry reflected, recounting stories that spanned continents and lifetimes. "But coming home should feel like a victory lap. It shouldn't be yet another battlefield." Olivia's questions probed gently, guiding him through decades of reflection. When they arrived at recent events, her queries turned to the here and now. The spark ignited when a voice calls out in defiance against ingrained prejudice. "What you're doing, Mr. Bolton, it's pushing back against more than just a single incident. It's challenging a wider acceptance of inequity," Olivia urged, pen poised to record this modern odyssey. He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "Change doesn't come easy, Miss Carmichael, but not voicing our injustices only leaves room for silence to fester into compliance. We owe it to ourselves and generations ahead to speak out." As the interview concluded, Olivia shook Henry's hand, acknowledging the strength it took to share such a personal history. "Thank you," she said sincerely, pocketing a small recorder filled with narratives that would soon shape opinions far from this living room. "I'll bring justice to your words." With an unflinching gaze, Henry replied, "Let justice find all of us." The article published following the interview didn't just recount facts, it injected spirit into them. Stories of triumphs, empathy, and resilience interwove with the harsh realities of systemic racism. The piece spread across platforms, picked up eagerly by those hungry for social reform and equality. Meanwhile, within the insulated walls of the police department, whispers morphed into cautious discourse. With attention turned their way, and facing mounting public pressure, a begrudging understanding emerged that they were now part of a larger dialogue demanding transparency and accountability. Across town, Henry watched ripples of influence crest into waves, people raising their voices, engaging in dialogues that once felt too perilous to navigate. His legacy expanded beyond family ties. He became a catalyst for change, each conversation sparked by his bravery building towards a more equal society. In the quiet moments that followed, as the calls subsided and the lights dimmed, Henry stood alone at his window. The night sky, sprawling and infinite, reminded him of missions past, of stars that guided him home through shadows and uncertainty, toward a dawn made possible by standing tall amidst the turbulence. Who do you stand up for? Leave your voice, share your thoughts, and let's push forward together. The airport buzzed with the controlled chaos of midday travelers, a constant river of people flowing through portals to far-off destinations. Andre Bolton navigated the terminal with the practiced ease of one used to orchestrating strategic operations. Dressed in his crisp military uniform, medals glinting against the navy blue fabric, he was a living emblem of discipline and decorum. Stepping onto the tarmac where a private car awaited, Andre reflected on the swift pace of recent events. His presence in the town had already shifted dialogues and attitudes, yet he knew, with clarity sharpened by years of command, that the battle for justice required not just presence, but unwavering, actionable commitment. As the town receded behind him, Andre's mind raced through tactical scenarios, ways to leverage his influence without overtly wielding the authority that came with his position. His return had to be more than symbolic. It needed to fuel tangible change. Later that afternoon, Andre's car rolled through the serene military base, a setting of order and familiarity. The wide expanse of neat barracks and commanding architecture were testament to the structure and predictability that defined his world, so different from the tangled complexities of racial injustice he sought to untangle. In his office, Andre sat at a polished mahogany desk, fingers sweeping over his keyboard as he organized his thoughts into a precise email. He crafted carefully worded communications to key military figures and civil leadership he'd met over the years. His goal was clear: garner support for his father's cause by creating a bridge between civic duty and military honor. Subject: urgent community injustice, action and support required. The email outlined the need for solidarity, appealing to a shared ethos of service and sacrifice. Andre requested the Air Force's active involvement in advocating for systemic law enforcement reform. It was an opportunity to lead by example beyond the battlefield. The uniform, he reasoned, was not merely a shield of authority, but a symbol of advocacy and responsibility. Pressing send, Andre knew he'd initiated a course that would encourage support well beyond the town's limits. Back at the town, the atmosphere remained charged with anticipation. News of the general's personal involvement had sent ripples through the community, mingling with the burgeoning interest generated by Olivia's article. The combination was electric, a perfect storm of outreach blending with introspective local action. Andre arranged a meeting at the local VFW hall with civic leaders, veterans, and key community influencers. It was a conscious strategy, harnessing the power of collective voices unified by common goals. The Veterans of Foreign Wars was more than just a club. It was a brotherhood steeped in legacy, echoing with the valor and vigor of countless servicemen and women. The meeting hall filled. A patchwork of uniforms and civilian attire encapsulated the diversity of experiences bound together by service. Faces worn by years of dedication mingled with the enthusiasm of youth, an intergenerational tapestry rich with purpose. Andre stood at the podium, the weight of his lineage and mission apparent in the measured cadence of his voice. He spoke earnestly about his father, weaving his narrative into a broader tapestry of perseverance and dedication. "My father held the line for this country, as many of you have," Andre began, his powerful voice cutting through the assembly. "Now we must hold the line for him, for justice and equality that extend beyond battlefields and into our backyard." He outlined the plan to engage local constituents, developing structured workshops to educate both the public and law enforcement on racial biases, initiating scholarships for youth aimed at leadership and inclusivity, and proposing a new veterans liaison to serve as a bridge between the police department and the community. "What we need," Andre continued, eyes sweeping the room, "is you, each of you. Your stories and inputs can help enact change. This isn't a one-man battle. It's our collective pledge toward a future grounded in respect and equality." His words resonated deeply, igniting a momentum that passed from one individual to the next like embers kindling into flame. Veterans who had served alongside Henry offered their immediate support. Community activists rose with pledges to circulate petitions. The local military base committed officers for diversity training programs, kicking off collaborations that promise to expand constructive dialogue and action. In synchronizing the military ethos with civic responsibility, Andre inspired a movement that transcended the boundaries of individuality, shifting the course toward systemic transformation. The room, filled with palpable energy and determination, felt like the nucleus of a newfound revolution, one man's story crystallizing into a chorus of change. As Andre left the hall, a wave of voices united behind him with gratitude and resolve. The sun dipped low over the town, casting long shadows that swallowed past complacency and nourished a growing spirit of defiance. The journey was not merely about confronting injustice, it was about sculpting a path forward, led by integrity and the firm belief that healing was not only possible but imperative. Together, they were building a bridge paved with shared values and kinship, an alliance against the darkness of prejudice that threatened the very fabric of their community. What alliances have you created to face adversity? Share your stories below as part of our growing dialogue. In the quiet corners of the town, whispering winds carried rumors and revelations, weaving them into a tapestry of speculation and conjecture that bound neighbors together in a web of silent curiosity. Oak Avenue, once a route known for its tranquility, had transformed into the epicenter of hushed conversations and furtive glances, each household adding their version of events to the growing myth of Henry Bolton's ordeal. Shoppers and grocery lines leaned closer, exchanging furtive nods and knowing looks. The story had grown tentacles, each grasping its strands of truth and imagination as people speculated about the unfolding drama. It was a small town, where the extraordinary inserted itself into the mundane with startling force, reshaping relationships and alliances with every passing day. Our core protagonists were at the heart of these murmurs. Henry and Andre found their names threaded into the town's narrative, guardians of a cause that surpassed its inception. Henry had become a symbol, his resilience and quiet dignity resonating deeply with those who felt the sting of injustice yet lacked the voice and platform to pronounce it. In living rooms and kitchens, alliances formed and unformed with the fluidity of the tide. Some rallied behind the Bolton name, propelled by empathy and a shared vision for a more inclusive and understanding future. Others, cloaked in old prejudices and fear of the unknown, dug heels into the soil of status quo, questioning the motives behind Andrew's return and the larger movement it seeded. Whispers echoed through the corridors of Oak Avenue High School, where students toggled between algebraic equations and social upheaval sparked right in their midst. Teachers recognized the teachable moment and seized it, leading impassioned discussions about race, privilege, and the power of collective action. In one such classroom, Miss Henderson, a history teacher known for her unwavering commitment to truth-telling, commanded attention from a group of eager minds, whose knowledge of the world now stretched far beyond textbooks. She had placed a stack of local newspapers on the front desk, each featuring Henry Bolton's story on the front page, the headlines a stark reminder of the intersection between past struggles and present realities. The actions we take today will define the stories they tell tomorrow, Ms. Henderson said, her voice carrying the authority of lived experience. What do you want those stories to say? The class buzzed with energy as students raised hands and voices, weaving their own stories into the narrative while critiquing and constructing paths forward. Ideas flowed freely, uninterrupted by the normal constraints of adolescent uncertainty. Meanwhile, at the local diner, Martha Simpson poured coffee into faded ceramic mugs for a table of regulars, residents who had lived through fires and floods, births and deaths, witnessing the town's evolving character through decades. "They're brave, the Boltons are," Martha said, her hands working with practiced speed, thoughts undeterred by the monotony of her task. "About time someone took a stand like this." "So you're on their side, then?" questioned Pete, a farmer whose broad shoulders bore decades of sun and toil, his face a roadmap of skepticism. "It's not just about sides, Pete," Martha countered, setting down the coffee pot. "It's about seeing each other, daring to see beyond color or uniform. We're all living here, aren't we?" Laughter erupted at a corner booth where teenagers gathered with phones in hand, scrolling through endless streams of information, hashtags memorializing the incident, blossoming across social media platforms, a digital reflection of society's conscience. Back in Henry's home, the mood remained one of pensive anticipation as news of the budding grassroots movement reached every corner of their community and beyond. Andre handled the influx of communications, liaising between the base, civic leaders, and newly formed alliances intent on leveraging this momentum. "People are starting to see, Dad," Andre said, folding a piece of correspondence, eyes bright with the hope that underpinned his strategic vision. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's growing into something much bigger." Henry nodded, eyes distant, as they gazed through the living room window to a world outside ready to acknowledge a truth he'd long lived with. He understood intimately that the struggle, while having ignited locally, was a reverberation of struggles repeated across the nation, a tapestry of shared experiences calling for systemic change. Yet amid the burgeoning movement, there was no ignoring the undercurrent of resistance, grumblings from those who resisted alterations to their comfort, their dominion founded on unspoken privilege. Henry knew these voices existed, had ignored or simply remained unaware of the lived realities faced by men like him, but that wouldn't deter him. Couldn't deter him from pushing forward. In the quiet hours of the night, Andre left his father's side to sit alone with his thoughts. The whispers wound through his consciousness, his and his father's names echoing in the streets, now beacons of a cause neither could have dreamed. Yet it was their shared reality now, threading through the fabric of the community, compelling conversations and actions that promised more than temporary change. For amidst the unease and alignment, one truth emerged. The town, once slumbering in complacency, had begun to stir with life, fraught with possibility and the chance for profound transformation. Those who had felt invisible found a glimmer of hope, a movement born not of a desire for headlines, but from the lived dignity of a man who had endured unseen. How are you challenging perspectives in your community? Share your stories and inspire others to stand with purpose. The crescendo of the media storm rose swiftly, its thunder echoing beyond the confines of the town into the national psyche, as Henry Bolton's confrontation with the authorities transformed into a broader call for justice. The story ascended from local whispers to a national spotlight. News vans gathered like locusts outside Henry's modest home, their satellite dishes pointed skyward, eager to capture and broadcast every nuanced detail of a narrative that had seized the country's attention. Reporters jostled for position, microphones extended like spears toward imagined targets. It wasn't just the story of a wronged veteran. It was a lightning rod for a deeper social critique, a platform from which the voiceless could be heard. Inside the cluttered newsroom of a major cable network, producers argued over which angle to take. The usual buzz of printers and dispatchers was overshadowed by the clamor of debates. How best to run the story without reducing it to familiar platitudes or losing the human core at its heart. Henry Bolton's story, said Jessica Albright, a lead producer to her team, is about more than just one man. We need to capture the weight and complexity here, not just recycled tropes. Let's make this count. They worked feverishly on a tight deadline, cutting together snippets of interviews, archival footage showcasing Henry's military career, and on-the-ground reactions to the unfolding events. The narrative unfolding on screen was one where personal history met systemic barriers with explosive resonance. Meanwhile, in his quiet living room, Henry watched with a composed detachment as various channels ran segments dissecting his experience. Headlines screamed through static across the screen, words like veteran, injustice, and racial profiling blaring like klaxons designed to arrest viewer attention and galvanize social consciousness. Despite the new intrusion into his life, Henry remained calm, his mind unwavering in its focus on the ripple effect of each broadcast. Every retelling brought with it stories from people across the nation, narrating similar injustices and solidarity, weaving themselves into a fabric that bespoke a collective ethos of resistance. Andre, who had decided to navigate these troubled waters alongside his father, fielded calls and emails. Networks begged for exclusive interviews, Advocacy groups reached out to lend their support. The national discourse had lit a fuse, manifesting through marches in distant cities and digital campaigns echoing the call for change. "Dad," Andre said, lowering his phone momentarily, "this is incredible. People are mobilizing not just here but everywhere. Your story is resonating in ways I didn't dare to imagine." Henry nodded, acknowledging the momentum that seemed to swell with each passing moment. "It was never just mine, Andre. It belongs to anyone who's ever felt marginalized, asked to give more than they've received." To amplify their cause, Andre had reached out to prominent figures known for their activism and influence. Editorials in national newspapers were penned by those inspired by Henry's bravery. Public figures sent out tweets and statements, urging systemic overhaul and pledging personal involvement. The effect was tangible. Numbers on social media soared as supporters and detractors alike voiced their opinions. The Twitter feed buzzed with hashtags like "Justice for Henry" and "Veterans with Honor," splintering through cyberspace as cultural conversation shifted towards action. Overnight, what had been a local incident transformed into a nationwide dialogue, a mirror reflecting America's unresolved narratives on race, power, and justice. News networks sparred with each other for audience share, titling programs with varied degrees of sensationalism, but resonating with a shared urgency. In living rooms across the country, families tuned in. Some viewers sat enraptured, empathy and anger sitting champagne high and hearts poised to overflow, while others beheld the story with trepidation, discomfort awakening old biases. The amplification of his voice hadn't come without its costs. Antagonists emerged from the woodworks, critics whose perceptions remained cemented in immutable prejudice. Shrined to ignorance, they criticized his motives, seeking to tarnish what had blossomed into a movement of courage and resilience. Through it all, Henry maintained his focus on the path ahead, undeterred by the chaos of divergent agendas. The purity of his mission, to ensure equality and equitable treatment, fumed brightly within, a torch carried by many hands over the hurdles of adversity. National figures, drawn by the strength of Henry's story, voiced their support and called for legislative reform. Confident that the national discourse could lead to tangible change, policy advocates suggested proposing federal training mandates for law enforcement, ensuring accountability and diversity reflective of the communities they served. As the days wore on and the media firestorm sustained its heat, Henry's presence remained steadfast, unchanged by fame, unashamed in his pursuit of justice. In this arena, punctuated by flashbulbs and voices, both asking and shouting, the melody of an overdue symphony began to emerge. This was not merely a story of a man wronged, but of many seeking the righteous harmonies of equity and unity. Amid the crescendo of voices, Henry stood as he always had, a man with a mission, now mirrored in the vast tapestry his story had stitched across the nation. Have you ever played a part in a movement? Share your experiences below and let us amplify a dialogue striving toward justice. Within the stark walls of the police department, there was a profound shift in the air, a change marked by unease and introspection, as if the very bricks and mortar absorbed the pervasive disquiet of impending accountability. The building, long a fixture at the heart of the community, now found itself cast under the piercing gaze of public scrutiny, with each officer acutely aware of the tension thrumming through their rank. Internal affairs, typically cloaked in the shadows of bureaucracy, emerged as the focal point of the department's introspection. Investigators, who were often whispered about in cautious tones, were now front and center, their presence demanding introspection and transparency amidst the turmoil. Lieutenant Davis, a veteran of the force known for his steadfast commitment to integrity, embarked on a series of probing interviews. His office, a sterile arena of order and precision, became a crucible through which every facet of the department's conduct would be scrutinized. "Officer Carter, thank you for coming in. Davis began, steering his guest into a chair opposite his desk. The formality of the statement was underscored by the keen gaze he leveled at Carter, whose past actions had ignited the current storm. Carter shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the weight of the narrative playing out beyond the department, encapsulating him in a vice-like grip. Here, stripped of the streetwise bravado he'd grown accustomed to wielding, he appeared a far cry from the authoritative figure who had once confronted Henry Bolton. "Lieutenant," Carter started, struggling to maintain an air of professionalism amid the scrutiny, "I handled the situation as I saw fit at the time. Bolton was uncooperative, and I merely followed protocol." Davis observed Carter intently, measuring the earnestness in his words against the broader narrative unfolding around them. The tension in the room was palpable, the scent of brewing coffee from a nearby machine serving as a grounding counterpoint amidst the emotional undertow. "We both know that protocol, Carter," Davis replied, measured tones testing the wall of defense. "But I need to understand whether personal bias might have influenced your decision-making process that day." Carter hesitated. The veneer of neutral professionalism stretched thin over the cracks of his human frailty. Beyond these walls, the world was changing, driven by voices clamoring for reform. Within them, Carter found himself increasingly isolated, a solitary sentinel on the battleground of his conscience. "I didn't intentionally target Bolton," he said, defending himself in a voice wrought with tension. "But maybe I acted too quickly. It's just, he didn't belong." The echo of his own words silenced Carter. The admission hung heavy in the air, a grim acknowledgement of the biases so seamlessly woven into his perception. "Our community deserves better," Davis said, leaning forward with intent, bridging the gap between superior and subordinate. "This is our opportunity to lead change from within, not just react to the pressure from outside. We need to dig deep, address biases, and implement training that reflects our community's diversity." Beyond the confines of the office, a broader investigation unfolded. Officers were interviewed, policies analyzed, and body camera footage reviewed with a fervor mirroring the urgency for reform. Internal memos circulated, highlighting the need for accountability and transparency, and calling for an overhaul of procedures steeped in tradition yet resistant to change. As days turned into weeks, the department, harbored under Davis's leadership, was engulfed in a transformative journey, navigating the delicate balance between transparency and protection, public expectation and internal reality. Conversations that had never dared the light of day now threaded their way into training sessions, committee meetings, and casual exchanges over coffee. In precinct meeting rooms, officers gathered to participate in sessions led by community leaders and diversity experts, their participation both voluntary and driven by necessity. Here, uncomfortable truths were dissected and discussed in the hope that understanding could pave the way to a more equitable future. Among the facilitators stood Olivia Carmichael, whose role as a journalist had expanded beyond storytelling into advocacy. Her direct engagement with officers framed not only the media portrayal of the events, but also contributed to fostering the dialogue essential for bridging understanding between disparate community factions. "This isn't about pointing fingers," Olivia asserted, addressing an assembly of uniformed personnel. "It's about reckoning with the perceptions and stereotypes we've internalized and finding ways to overcome them together." The officers listened intently, absorbing her insights as seeds of empathy planted within a soil tilled by generations of misunderstanding began to take root. Lieutenant Davis recognized that the transformation underway extended beyond internal reforms. It was about forging ties with the community in ways that transcended uniforms and badges. He attended town hall meetings, listening to and engaging with residents who shared their lived experiences and grievances, recognizing that the path to rebuilding trust lay in shared dialogue and mutual respect. As Henry Bolton's narrative continued to orchestrate change, rippling outwards from the epicenter of his initial confrontation, the police department, once a symbol of oppression for so many, became a focal point for progressive dialogue. Forging new policies with transparency and fostering an environment steeped in empathy provided grounds for optimism, one that Henry himself had laid with incredible fortitude. Amidst policy reforms and shifts in public perception, a genuine connection had begun to weave its way between the town's heart and its protectors. Seeds of change had taken root, promising to cultivate a future in which justice and equity thrived as cornerstones of their collective effort. What conversations are you initiating in your sphere to inspire change? Share your voice to continue the dialogue for justice. The Bolton home, a humble abode now under the nation's watchful gaze, brimmed with a mix of nostalgia and enduring hope. It was here, amidst the familiar comfort of worn furniture and the silent sentinel of photographs lining the mantel, that the past mingled with aspirations for a transformed future. Henry sat at the kitchen table, the afternoon sun painting him in a gentle glow. Beside him, a framed picture of Jacqueline seemed to radiate encouragement. Though gone from this world, her energy infused every effort, her spirit a guiding beacon in moments of uncertainty. As Henry sipped his coffee, lost in thoughts that wove through history and hope, Mary, his neighbor and longtime friend, arrived. Her presence as comforting as the smell of fresh rain on earth. Mary, a stalwart of the community and an ally through decades of shared struggles, had witnessed and endured alongside Henry and Jacqueline many of life's trials. "Henry," Mary began as she entered, cane tapping softly against the worn linoleum floor, "I've been thinking about Jackie a lot lately." Henry nodded, the curl of a smile touching his lips as he traced the edges of Jacqueline's image with a gaze steadied by memory. "She's been on my mind too, especially now." She had a way of pushing for change with that unyielding grace of hers. Mary settled into the chair opposite him, her aged hands clasping his with a tenderness born from years of shared resilience. "She'd be so proud of you, Henry. Of Andre, too. What you're doing." "Well, it's what we've all been fighting for." "Thank you, Mary," Henry replied quietly. "It's taken me far too long to find my voice again, but Jackie always knew how to turn even the smallest ripple into a wave. She had a gift for planting seeds of change in every person she met. Those seeds, Mary knew, had blossomed over lifetimes, nurtured by hope and fortified by sacrifice. Together, they spoke of Jacqueline Verne, her quiet strength, her laughter, and her steadfast commitment to justice. She had lived a life intertwined with Henry's in such profound partnership that her essence imbued every corner of their home. "I'll never forget the marches we joined, side by side," Mary continued, the past unfurling in her mind like a sepia-toned film reel. "Raising our voices for what was right. It was terrifying then, but Jackie always said it was fear that pushed us forward, not held us back." Henry remembered the tremor in Jacqueline's hand as she clasped his during those pivotal moments, how that same hand had steadied him through turbulence far and wide. She'd shine in rooms heavy with discomfort, her presence enough to eclipse entrenched tensions and rally others to a shared cause. She knew how to turn conversation into a catalyst. Henry mused aloud. "I like to think she's somewhere up there, guiding me now, rooting for this newfound momentum." They discussed their intertwined pasts, savoring the vitality of victories secured, however small, and the echo of dreams yet to be realized. Their conversation was punctuated by the ebb and flow of communal spirit transcending mere words, weaving together fragments of courage, resilience, and unspoken promises. As Henry and Mary reflected on Jacqueline's influence, their dialogue transcended the personal, embracing the universality of shared human experience. In their egos and overlaps found all-in-essent suggestions for a future breathing promise and our readiness to lay hold to some of life's traumas. Their exchange unfolded before Andre entered to join them. He approached with letters and clippings in hand, a collection of outreach and support from across communities, newly awakened to purpose and solidarity. His face bore the signature of his mother's resolve, a gentle strength that bridged generations with grace. "Dad, Mary," Andre greeted them warmly, the familiarity of his presence a balm unto itself. "You've got people talking. They're listening. It's stirring change beyond what we imagined." Henry passed the letters to Mary, her eyes widening as she read words written in different hands, yet echoing the same refrain of encouragement and resolve. The letters were heartbeats of hope, penned by those previously disenfranchised or disheartened, now finding voices through the Boltons' journey. They sat together, a trinity of shared purpose born from familial ties and communal bonds, basking in the knowledge that what they had set into motion by confronting bias and injustice would carry ripples far beyond this kitchen table. Around them, the walls bore witness to the unfolding narrative, each crevice a testament to the enduring spirit that had defined the Boltons, from the love Henry shared with Jacqueline to the dreams they stoked within Andre. It was a sanctuary built by their own hands, a beacon signaling tomorrow's promise. And in those quiet moments, as the sun dipped low and cast long shadows through the windows, their conversation persisted, a timeless exchange charting new directions founded in ancestry and hope. The call for justice reverberated in every shared look, every soft-spoken word, drawing from the wellspring of love that Jacqueline had cultivated. What memories are you honoring in your push for change? Let your story add to the tapestry and inspire others on this shared journey forward. Inside a sterile meeting room of the police station, Officer Carter found himself entrenched in self-reflection. The walls seemed to close in, thick with echoes of his past decisions that now, under scrutiny, rippled with unintended consequences. The air was taut with the tension of introspection, and Carter, for the first time, saw his reflection not in medals or accolades, but through the reality thrust upon him by Henry Bolton's strength. Seated across from him were his peers from internal affairs, their roles now amplified by the critical spotlight focused on the department's inner workings. Each probing question, each pointed pause, forced Carter to confront the paradox of his actions, unraveling a tightly held narrative of professionalism intertwined with personal bias. He had been called into this interrogation room before, but never under such circumstances where the very tenets of his role hung precariously in balance. Today, Carter entered as more than an officer. He was a man, wrestling with the dichotomy of his past choices and the stark revelations they heralded. "Officer Carter, we need to understand your mindset during the incident involving Mr. Bolton," stated Davis, his tone firm yet devoid of accusation. Urging a dialogue meant as much for clarity as transparency. Carter shifted in his seat, the scrape of metal on linoleum echoing louder than the voices in the room. He hesitated, awareness dawning with a clarity beyond what his career had previously forced him to confront. "I saw him, Henry Bolton, standing there, and all I saw, shamefully, was a presence that disrupted the expected," Carter finally said, the confession trickling through the silence. And in that confession lay the crux of the matter. Carter's actions had been guided not by tangible facts nor overt threats, but by the deeply embedded perceptions that colored his view of who's welcome and who's not. A perception flawed, like an artist's perspective, molded and corrupted by the shadows of ingrained prejudice. As Davis probed further, Carter was forced to canvass the very origins of his biases, those unspoken beliefs artistically masked, yet quietly eroding the foundations of his duty. It was the inheritance of unchallenged preconceptions, unremarkable in their familiarity, yet devastative in their recklessness. "This wasn't about protocol failing, Carter. It's about an oversight in recognizing humanity over inherited narratives," Davis offered, not from a place of condemnation, but in a bid to kindle comprehension. His voice was steadied by years of experience, crafted by a desire to foster dialogue that extended beyond mere reprimand. Carter exhaled heavily, the realization settling over him like the slow fog of dawn. "I've been blind," he murmured. I looked at him and saw difference, not similarity. I saw fear, not familiarity. The admission, vulnerable as a lifeline cast adrift, forged a bridge between Carter and his actions. In the sigh that followed, the wings of tentative acknowledgement unfurled, a beginning, however cautious, for reconciliation with the truth. As whispers of systemic change reverberated from the outside world, Carter's introspection took on a shape of its own inside the meeting room. His narrative, held together by threads of authority, unraveled, opened to reconciliation, leading not just to personal transformation, but influencing the broader collective searching for answers. Recognizing this isn't the end, Officer Carter, Davis underscored, redirecting the conversation toward action. It's the beginning of redefining your role, not just within the department, but within the community whose trust we vow to uphold. Emerging from the chambers of self-examination, Carter found himself standing on the precipice of reformation, where understanding and the guilt of hindsight merged, distilling introspection into purposeful change. The promise of further diversity training and community integration programs set by the department offered paths toward forgiveness, not just of self, but of the institutions they swore to serve. Outside the office, Officer Carter rejoined the watchful world, this time donning a mantle woven from newfound perspective. He wasn't absolved atonement forged from action over mere acceptance, yet the journey ahead lay marked by commitment rather than complacency. In the enveloping bustle of his precinct, where chaos often gave way to camaraderie, Carter now saw faces not just as aspects of duty, but as narratives, each cradling a universe akin to those shared by his own. This revelation, bittersweet as it was illuminating, carved pathways for greater empathy, understanding, and those purposeful connections long neglected. While the sun dipped low beyond the town, curbed along Oak Avenue, Carter's path seemed no longer fragmented, but melded in a quiet reconciliation, forming a part of the broader, iridescent landscape evolving beyond the bolts of bias. As he walked the street again, with stories anew, Carter pondered the questions bubbling beneath the surface. What prejudice have I carried? What opportunity for dialogue and transformation awaits us all? Who will you walk beside to illuminate new truths? Share reflections from your step upon this shared journey. The heartbeat of a town on the brink of transformation echoed through its cobblestone streets and into the open spaces where people gathered with palpable urgency. Oak Avenue became the nucleus of progress, ablaze with the fervor of those determined to seize the moment and charge its momentum with tangible action. As dusk descended, casting the town in a soft, forgiving hue, the streets filled with an array of voices weaving together in chorus. Men, women, and youths converged with banners and placards, each boldly stating their demands for justice, equality, and the respect they deserved. The signs bore slogans that pulsed with the same lifeblood Henry had injected into this burgeoning movement. Henry, standing at the sidelines with Andre by his side, watched as the crowd swelled. The energy was infectious, drawing from a collective well of shared stories and common dreams. It was a tapestry of hope, stitched together by the afflictions and aspirations of those defying status quo with every step they took forward. "Are you ready for this, Dad?" Andre asked, his voice barely audible above the spirited chants rising and falling around them. His eyes reflected a mixture of pride and determination, his faith in their cause unwavering. "Yes," Henry replied, feeling the words surge through him as the crowd's rumble vibrated in his bones, a symphony of solidarity. "It's time." The protest progressed down Oak Avenue, a vibrant entity that breathed life into stagnant corners of the town. Families peered from residences, some joining the ranks, swept up by the resonating call for equality that could no longer be ignored. Among the marchers was Jenna Bennett, a high school junior who had stopped debating and decided to join the movement, her hands gripping a sign that read, justice for all. Educators, store owners, and retirees swelled the ranks, past indifference shed like old skin amidst the effervescent unity of purpose. Conversations ignited along the way. Elderly voices sharing tales of past marches with youthful exuberance, each story a testament to an unyielding fight carried through generations. The community's diverse palette streamed with the vibrancy of dissent, making the broad daylight surrender to their resolve. Henry and Andre moved through the crowd, not as figureheads standing apart, but as fellow advocates, embraced by the undulating sea of humanity. Their names, their story, saturated the chants, a binding substance that transformed individual narratives into an anthem for equality. Officer Carter, standing at the edge of the route, witnessed the unfolding spectacle with renewed perspective. His vantage point underscored the tenuous bridge he now traversed between his past actions and the present call for reform. This march of voices, striving beyond fear, asserting the dignity long denied them. He nodded at Henry as their eyes met, and in that momentary exchange, grace was offered, a quiet acknowledgement of accountability acknowledged. The baton Carter once wielded as an object of enforcement was now grasped as a symbol of his commitment to listening, learning, and contributing to positive change. The march culminated at the town square, a space traditionally designated for official proclamations and ceremonious occasions. While the air buzzed with unspoken anticipation, the activists clustered around a makeshift stage, breaths crystallizing against the cool evening air. It was here that the gathered crowd confronted the heart of the movement, a shared acknowledgement that they stood at the precipice of progress, forged not by the voices of the few, but by the courage of the many. Andre introduced his father with a reverence that sprang from deep roots. "My father, Henry Bolton, a veteran, a father, a man who stands resiliently in the face of injustice," he announced, each word galvanizing the crowd, drawing tangible solidarity. The collective cheer rose, a wave of sound reflecting the undamped spirit of freedom now freely coursing through the people. Henry took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the air weighted by expectation and trust. He gazed into a sea of faces reflecting the light of shared purpose, each person carrying with them a piece of the narrative that had woven this moment. "Thank you, all of you, for standing here today," he began, his voice grounded in a deep resonance rooted in truth. Each word was deliberate, laced with history and shimmering with hope. "This isn't about one man's fight. It's about all of us, reclaiming our dignity, asserting our rightful place in society, and forging a path toward equality for our children and those who follow." And in the charged silence that followed, reaffirmed by affirming nods, Henry spoke not just for himself, but for every person who had traveled this arduous journey, those who had felt the shadow of bias, but refused to be silenced. The townsfolk, comprising all races and creeds, nodded, some with tears marking paths down faces uplit by street lamps, candles illuminating truth. As the cadence of unity swelled, echoing in heartbeats synchronized, the night air carried their voices beyond the town limits. It echoed in the halls of power, demanding recognition and reform, built upon the indomitable ground laid by Henry Bolton's walk toward justice. And as they stood together, shoulders brushing beneath the expansive sky, they sensed it, the turning tide, signaling that here and now citizens had spoken, and the nation had begun to listen. Will you march with us on this journey toward justice? Share your commitment in the comments below and let your voice amplify this vital cause. Beneath the hush of nightfall, a figure stood at the periphery of the dissipating crowd. The departure of the marchers left an electric silence, like the aftershock of a clap of thunder. Everyone who had been a part of the protest seemed infused with a glimmer of hope, a shared sense of having contributed to something greater than themselves. Not everyone parted as defenders of the movement, however. For every ally, there were those who viewed the day's events with skepticism or outright disdain. Yet, even within the complexities of opposition and support, there emerged an unexpected ally. Elizabeth Hawthorne watched the crowd thin from the steps of her law office. Renowned in town for her fierce litigation skills, Elizabeth was an unlikely figure in the narrative spun by the day's events. She had spent years defending corporate interests and target-hardening herself against personal entanglements that might compromise her professional facade. But as the weight of the day's events settled, it stirred something dormant within her, a vestige of the passion that once fueled her youthful idealism before cynicism had taken its icy hold. The discourse over justice had ignited sparks of moral reasoning within her hardened exterior. Watching from the sidelines had never been her way. She knew the game too well. She had the intellect, the knowledge of law's intricacies, and an innate capacity for using them constructively when so compelled. It was the newspaper story on Henry Bolton that first piqued her interest, his quiet dignity in the face of such blatant injustice, a stark counterpoint to the usual cases she undertook. Now, standing atop the steps of her cobblestone sanctuary, she watched the Boltons, father and son, silhouetted against the stage lights, their struggles undisguised yet powerfully defiant. "Elizabeth," came a gravelly voice alongside her, jarring her from her reverie. She barely turned, recognizing the familiar presence of Thomas Green, an old friend and colleague whose work as a civil rights attorney was legendary in these parts. His arrival was serendipitous and entirely purposeful. "Tom," she acknowledged, her voice measured, knowing he noted the thoughtful edge in her tone. Thomas had a sense about these things, the ability to discern the motives and truths hidden beneath the surface. "You're thinking of getting involved. I can see it," Thomas suggested, gaze still fixed on the Boltons, understanding the gravity of her internal deliberations. His eyes, wise with experience, mirrored both the challenge and the opportunity this situation provided. "I am," Elizabeth admitted, breaking her own silence with candor rarely afforded to others. "But I've been on the other side too long. What can I offer here that would genuinely make a difference?" "Your skills," Thomas replied simply, his faith in her capabilities unwavering. "We need voices that know how to navigate the systems that built these barriers even better than they do. And you have that know-how, Elizabeth. You can dismantle legal roadblocks and set precedents." His words held merit. Elizabeth had spent years meticulously deconstructing the defenses of those who dared challenge her clients. Turning that skill set around, using it to protect instead of prosecute, casting justice's net rather than another line of fiscal protection, offered a thrilling paradox she could no longer ignore. Thomas continued, his voice dipping with sincerity. "Henry sparked something, and honestly, we could use someone like you in this fight, not just for today or tomorrow, but for the generational change we need." Elizabeth absorbed his words in silence, feeling the insistent pull towards involvement. She allowed herself a moment to examine the possibilities that promise held. She saw now what Thomas saw, an opportunity to step beyond the constraints of her own career and into a broader narrative where her contributions might resonate in meaningful ways. "All right, Tom, count me in," she said finally, decisiveness lacing her words. It was a commitment to Henry, to the movement, and to herself. The seasoned attorney smiled, gratified by her resolve. "Good. Now, let's go introduce ourselves properly." Together they made their way toward the Boltons, the rhythmic beat of justice still echoing through the evening air. Elizabeth fell in stride with Thomas, a new resolve propelling her forward, every step imprinting promise upon Oak Avenue's memory-scarred path. Each echo from their footfalls exclaimed, silently, proclaiming their unity in purpose. "Mr. Bolton, General Bolton," Thomas greeted as they reached the foot of the stage, where Henry and Andre were engaged in conversation with community leaders. He nodded toward Elizabeth. "May I introduce Elizabeth Hawthorne?" Elizabeth extended her hand toward Henry, her gaze unflinching and imbued with newfound commitment. "Pleasure to meet you both. I've followed your story and would like to offer my skills and support for the journey ahead." Henry shook her hand, his grip firm, a knowing look passing between them, an acknowledgement of potential and shared mission. "Thank you, Ms. Hawthorne. We need all the help we can get." he replied, a smile punctuating the statement as a welcoming invitation. In that moment, the alliance was sealed not just with handshakes, but with promises that transcended spoken words. Upon that stage, where hopes had been broadcast to the nation, a new chapter began, one where skill, experience, and a passion for justice converged. As the night enveloped the town, guiding them into a future shaped by determination and unity, Elizabeth's unexpected yet timely entrance into the fold signaled a beacon of hope for the work to come. What unexpected alliances have you formed in pursuit of justice? Share your experiences to inspire continued collaboration for change. The night sky arched over the gathering, peppered with stars that blinked in concert with the twinkling stirrings of resolve among the assembled. The air remained charged with a blend of accomplishment and the weight of a journey far from complete. As the crowd dispersed, sharing lingering sentiments of camaraderie, Henry and Andre stayed behind, their thoughts turned inward to the drums of history that now beat steadily within them. Henry stood quietly for a moment, eyes on the distant hills beyond Oak Avenue, lost in thought as memories cascaded through him unbidden. His gaze was anchored by the events of today, but his heart traveled pathways long trodden, the past flaring to life in vivid snapshots, binding his story to a continuum that stretched across generations. In the resonance of history's echo, he recalled another march, an endless pattern of footfalls against cobblestones, hands clutching banners aloft amidst a hopeful sea of faces, back in the days when names like King and Evers and Parks were mistreated, yet towering symbols of courage. The air had been thick then, too, with the scent of change, fermented through pain and triumph. That world, though changed, still spoke in pieces through Henry, the experiences of his youth etched into skin and memory alike. Here, now, he drew strength from the fights he had once watched at a distance, now thrust into the very heart of it, with shoulder against stone. The flicker of torches along the protest lines tonight had felt akin to the candles held for vigils long past. The community gathered in solemn witness to injustice, yet refusing its dominance. Always those moments carried truths not easily told, lessons equally painful as they were enlightening, a heritage of dissent to be worn like armor. Thinking about back then? Andre asked, joining him in contemplative silence. Hard not to, Henry replied, eyes still cast toward the horizon. Some things haven't changed fast enough, but then I remember that place, that square in Montgomery, how we marched in quiet defiance, and I see parts of that same spirit in you and these folks today. Andre listened, understanding the legacy they continued had borne great sacrifice, lessons written with hope in ink that too often bled through struggle. Henry turned to his son, the palpable weight of legacy pressing lightly, delivering the sober acknowledgement of an inherited mantle. You've taken the torch, Andre. Your fight speaks for all those voices in the past, adding to the sonorous chant, for the generational link was there in their shared gaze, shimmering like a bridge over rivers of time. Andre, who had spent years climbing ranks through a world where race often clouded duty, now stood taller, his resolve affirming his father's efforts. Alongside figures he'd admired growing up. I learned from the best, didn't I? Andre responded, the warmth of his father's teachings echoing in his tone. This isn't just our fight now. It's about every story, every voice made louder by our gatherings. The evening cloaked them in silence, but for the whispers of leaves, echoes of footfalls retreating into slumber. Henry imagined generations gone by, whose struggles echoed here in this sleepy town, whose stories spoke loudly now through actions, not just words. Tackling story, too, a narrative enfolded in every choice, every move. They made this fight as much for her memory, for her dreams quenched before they fully unfurled, as they did for the legacy of freedom too long denied. They stood side by side and, before departing, cast eyes again toward the roads beneath which histories slumbered. They pledged silently to the ghosts of their forebears, promising that the seeds of today's actions would flower tomorrow in progress that honored the labor of hearts long gone, but still intimately woven into theirs. When they finally turned away to traverse the quiet street home, Henry and Andre carried with them the buoyant dreams of a future unlocked by keys the past had forged, for in each step, marked by the history of movements earlier trod, lay Turing pages, and welcoming a dawn that promised long-awaited change. Share with us your own stories that reach across time to connect past movements with today's strides toward justice. Your voice matters in this extensive, continuing conversation. The morning sun rose with a languid grace over Oak Avenue, casting long shadows that stretched across the town, illuminating paths both new and familiar. As the town stirred to life, Henry Bolton prepared for a pivotal encounter that loomed like an unseen shadow, a convergence of past actions and present resolve. He moved with practiced ease through the house, collecting keys and his weathered cap, a faithful companion through countless adventures. The hour was early, as if the day itself awaited breathlessly for the unfolding of something significant. The air held a crisp edge, charged with anticipation. Today, Henry and Andre were to meet with Officer Carter, a confrontation poised on the precipice of change, one that promised revelation for both the accused and the aggrieved. They reached the station, a structure stodgy and solid amidst the backdrop of a society's shifting tides. Davis had arranged for the meeting, understanding the importance of discourse not only in resolution but in healing. The station buzzed with its own rhythm, alive with the ebb and flow of law and duty, a fortress of order in a world oftentimes defined by chaos. "Mr. Bolton, General Bolton," Davis greeted them, his demeanor imbued with respect and understanding. "Officer Carter is waiting for you." Henry acknowledged Davis with a nod, a signal infused with gratitude and gravitas. Andre stood beside him, a pillar of support embodying fortitude and steel as they traversed the corridor leading to the meeting room. Inside, Carter sat at a steel table, his expression betraying a mix of apprehension and determination. He straightened in his chair as the Boltons entered, the reality of this moment anchoring him to the weight of choices he had made. Henry took his seat, looking intently at Carter. It was a look that conveyed not just accumulation of years, but a depth of spirit that Carter found himself grappling with. Andre settled beside his father, his presence a testament to the power of solidarity. "Officer Carter," Henry began, his voice steady and unwavering, "thank you for agreeing to meet with us today." Carter nodded, his throat constricting with unsaid apologies, teetering on the precipice of articulation. The air between them trembled, pregnant with possibility, a canvas upon which justice could be painted anew. "Mr. Bolton, I wanted to say—" Carter hesitated, finding the right words a slippery endeavor. "I know I made a mistake, a grievous one. I was wrong to treat you the way I did." Henry absorbed the words, anchoring them into the edifice of history, a ledger of accountability weighted with the deeds of yesterday. The apology felt genuine, a crack in the armor of institutional prejudice. "Recognition is the first step," Henry replied, his expression revealing a mixture of forgiveness and resolve. "There's more to this than just the incident between us, you see. It isn't about one event, it's about acknowledging and confronting what lies beneath the surface." Andre interjected, his measured tones echoing with the authority of lived experience. "Dad is right. Today must be about more than apologies. It's about changing perspectives, delivering systemic change that addresses and uproots the prejudices that allowed this to happen to begin with." Carter nodded, the earnestness in Andre's words striking him with potent resonance. "That's why I'm here. To listen, to understand how we can prevent this from happening again." His sincerity was palpable, promising dialogues rather than dismissals. "We appreciate that," Henry said, hope shimmering through his words. "But it will require more than listening. It will need commitment from you, from the department, to engage with the people who call this community home. Henry's insights were profound, carried across years of injustices weathered and stories shared. Carter knew this meeting was not merely about resolution. It was about reconciliation, closing chasms forged by indifference, ignorance, and misinformation. Davis watched as the dialogue unfolded, a transformative narrative, inked not in the rigidity of law but in the flexibilities of human understanding. Here amongst these walls, where the ticking clock harmonized with the voices of change, solitude gave way to collective action, cultivated by partnership. As the conversation deepened, the room filled with a tangible commitment, an unspoken oath to create pathways toward trust, amplified by empathy and sustained by concrete actions designed to dismantle lingering barriers. In those moments, across spoken truths and unguarded revelations, Carter's perspective shifted, a convolution of remorse and aspiration, accepting dictates of a future different from the script handed down by predecessors, forging new meaning in his role, protector not enforcer. The encounter concluded with handshakes, a gesture of respect completing the cycle of vindication. Carter understood this compact was not an ending, but a beginning, paving the way toward redefining both his duty and humanity. Upon leaving the station, Henry and Andre knew this interchange was but one stone on the road to transform a journey into justice. They departed with Carter's commitment steadfast beside them, a newfound ally in the march toward equality. What dialogues can you engage in today to bridge the divides around you? Share your commitment to use discourse as a tool for understanding and change. The rich, golden hue of the morning sun flooded through the high windows of the town hall, a place typically adorned with bureaucratic formalities, now buzzing with a vibrancy fueled by the urgency of recent events. Seats filled quickly as residents of Oak Avenue and surrounding areas gathered for what was undoubtedly one of the most anticipated city council meetings in recent history. The council chamber, normally a space for mundane concerns of zoning laws and public works, transformed into a crucible of potential and expectation, its atmosphere charged with the promise of transformative dialogue, a hub where the voices of the community could knit together a tapestry of progress. Council members assembled at the head of the room, their usual routine subsumed by the consciousness that today's meeting was more than ceremonial. Systemic change was not just discussed but demanded by the citizens whose patience had waned, who now saw daylight seeping through cracks in the status quo. Henry Bolton arrived with Andre in tow, a figurehead suffused with the quiet strength of those who stand upon the precipice of history. As they took their seats at the front, other community leaders nodded in acknowledgement and solidarity, recognizing in them the vanguard of a contemporary movement for justice. Mayor Thompson, a leader known for his pragmatic yet forward-thinking policies, called the meeting to order. His gaze darted across the expectant crowd, acknowledging the breadth of interest their gathering had garnered. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice amplified by the microphone but enriched by sincerity, "we are here today to address matters critical to our community's spirit, issues of race, equality, and justice." His opening was met with enthusiastic applause, a confirmation of communal alignment, as Henry stood at the heart of this seminal moment. Many in the room knew Henry, some for decades, as a neighbor, a veteran, a friend. Today they saw him as a standard-bearer for the tide of change, his experience a guiding beacon, illuminating the path forward. Today, we need commitment from every level of leadership, promising accountability, forging a community bound by trust, said Henry. His words met with nods and hushed agreement. "And it starts right here," he continued, executing a motion that was as much symbolic as it was procedural. It was time to transition commitment into actionable change, a motion strategically crafted, informed by residents and allies alike, pointing toward systemic overhaul within law enforcement practices. Andre stepped forward in support of his father, echoing the sentiment with notions rooted in strategic resolve. As we stand before this council, we call for the implementation of comprehensive diversity training within our police force, aggregate measures that ensure accountability and bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community. Council members absorbed the commentary, nodding, deliberating the import of each proposal. We've seen too vividly the need for revisiting policies ensuring respect and safety come hand in hand with duty, Andre emphasized, his recommendations steeped in the professional ethos that had guided his own journey. The proceedings invigorated the air, punctuated by impassioned declarations from activists and residents alike, each story iterating fragments of the overarching narrative Henry's own journey had ignited. The demands were clear: a commitment to transparency, the establishment of a community oversight committee, and a comprehensive review of departmental practices. Representatives from both the police department and community leaders took the stage, pledging their alliance and shared vision for equitable reform. They painted plans for actions that could reshape practices ingrained over time and fortified by unchallenged tradition. Mayor Thompson, understanding the breadth of the movement before him, affirmed the collective resolution, echoing their commitment to transparency and reform. "These are your streets," he highlighted, addressing the gathered crowd. "Your leadership is critical as we sow seeds for tomorrow's harvest, a future marked by justice, dignity, and respect." As hands rose in votes and measures passed with overwhelming consensus, a palpable relief and unity reverberated through the room. This was more than policymaking. It was the illumination of a new path forward, an alliance of law, governance, and citizenry that dared to hold accountable the promise of equality. The meeting adjourned with a standing ovation, one that carried not only the resonance of this shared moment, but the spirit of a community whose voices had, for far too long, strained to be heard above the din of complacency. As Henry and Andre stepped back into the sunlit day, their senses filled with the crescendo of new beginnings, the gravity of the work left ahead balanced by the symmetry of accomplishment. In reshaping the framework of their town, they invited others to linger at intersections of hope and justice, to embody the voices whose echoes garner strength in numbers. What initiatives can you ignite within your community to spearhead justice and equality? Lend your voice to our evolving dialogue and let us know how you're leading change. As the town hall meeting's energy spilled over into the streets, the citizens of Oak Avenue found themselves at crossroads, metaphysical and literal. The measures passed inside the hall were the first bricks in a bridge to change. Yet the journey to unite disparate parts of the community was just beginning. Sunlight cascaded across clusters of people on the sidewalks, sparkling off the pavement like an embrace, solidifying moments suspended in time. Conversations that had been silent or subdued now flowed openly, individuals daring to breach topics once considered taboo, each word an act of defiance or collaboration in dismantling inherited misperception. Within this awakening, lines had inevitably been drawn, lines marked not with hatred but with discomfort and uncertainty. Old friends and neighbors navigated newfound realities, some drawn closer by shared resolve, others standing at the edge, contemplating the worth and weight of transformation. The subtle shifts in relationships ebbed beneath Henry's awareness as he navigated the crowd with Andre. Each interaction reaffirmed his position as both leader and learner, charged with conveying the stories of those who had suffered injustice and ensuring that the momentum cultivated did not falter. A familiar face approached, Peter Mahoney, a retired teacher and longtime acquaintance of Henry's. They had shared many laughs over backyard fences, but today Peter's expression was overshadowed by consideration, the kind that set friendships teetering at the brink of renewal or regression. "Henry," Peter started, slowing his stride as he and his wife Cynthia approached. "Impressive meeting today. You really got the community moving." His words were measured, canvassed by the weight of thoughts left unspoken. "Thanks, Peter," Henry replied, the cordiality dancing between formal and familiar as they immersed themselves in the nuanced dance of understanding differences anew. Peter hesitated, glancing at Cynthia, whose hand held his with supportive firmness. "I've been thinking a lot, about everything that's been happening. Cynthia and I, we're trying to learn, reading about privilege, reflecting on what it means for us." Henry nodded, recognizing in Peter's admission a journey begun, tentative yet sincere. "I understand, Pate. We've all got things to learn, or unlearn, I suppose. But that willingness to reflect and adjust, that counts for a lot." Their candid exchange, while slightly awkward, underscored the crests and valleys faced in navigating dialogue laden with legacy. In their moment of crossing such lines, society's very definition stood challenged, neither victim nor change agent, but both, together, in pursuit of a new equilibrium. Across the street, Anne-Marie, a young activist inspired by the protest, found herself deep in discussion with her childhood friend Lucas. They were caught in one of these freshly drawn lines, a demarcation between allyship and apathy. "You've joined them, have you?" Lucas asked, teasingly, yet edged with the curiosity of those unprepared for the call to action. He had always known Anne-Marie to feel strongly, yet witnessing her actively at the forefront provoked analysis of his own place within the evolving societal landscape. "It's not about joining a side, Lucas," Anne-Marie replied, each word carrying conviction born from nights spent at the kitchen table, armed with articles and illuminated by humane determination. "It's about recognizing what's right and lending our voices to amplify what needs change." Lucas contemplated this, envisioning edges where their worldview had once aligned, now reshaped by perspectives he had not previously had to reconsider. Henry, overhearing snippets of their exchange, logged each interaction as validation for the community's progress, a demonstration of discourse that, though challenging, indicated steps toward informed cohesion rather than fracturing. As the day unfolded, painted in hues of dawning potential, Henry and Andre moved with purpose through their town. Faces greeted them with honest smiles and expressions weighted by the gravity of choice, echoing a shared reality they all now must face. Lines once dividing fell by the wayside, replaced by intersections brimming with compromise. Human bridges finding steady footing, the work ahead constructing previously unfathomed connections. And as everyone navigated these territories, Henry realized, community itself became similarly tasked with reaching deeper to engage genuinely with its constellations of stories. As Henry and Andre paused at the town square near its commemorative oak tree, the very symbol of strength and longevity, Henry's gaze followed the rise of the branches into the sky. This tree Garono, the enduring symbol of Oak Avenue, had witnessed the town's progression over decades, and as community members, laden with history both painful and redemptive, embraced opportunities to transform, it would bear witness to the triumph of reconciliation, forged in reality as they found. And each line, drawn anew, was marked a choice, a commitment to stand at the intersection of past and potential, where shared understanding heralded the shaping of a renewed community. Where do you stand on the lines within your community, and how will you bridge them? Share your experiences and join our ever-growing dialogue for change. The quiet hum of early evening settled around Officer Carter as he sat at his kitchen table, the remnants of the day's light casting long shadows that danced gently on the walls. The burdens forged from recent revelations pressed upon him with palpable weight, their roots extending deep into his consciousness like tendrils creeping over unsteady ground. The conversation with Henry and Andre had left an indelible mark, compelling him to navigate through the labyrinth of ingrained biases and confront the truths that dwelt within uncomfortable corners of his soul. A single phrase from that meeting reverberated within him. It's not just about the uniform, but the person wearing it. And as he nursed a mug of black coffee, Carter pondered the perspective-shifting echo of those words. They called for introspection, demanding him to dissect not just his actions, but the motives that underpinned them. His mind flashed through moments of his career, the pride of achievements, the respect of colleagues, yet now shadowed by the awareness that his understanding of duty had long been incomplete. Lena, his wife, a partner whose love had remained steadfast through tumultuous times, entered quietly, sensing the storm of thoughts racked with cacophonic severity. She approached him with the gentlest of intentions, setting a plate of dinner before him, though it was forgotten alongside the tempest swirling in his mind. "Long day, huh?" she ventured, her voice a soothing balm on his restless spirit. Carter leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply as his eyes found hers. "More than that. Change is coming, Lena, and it's pulling me along with it, whether I'm ready or not." Lena sat down across from him, resting her chin on her fingers, reflecting a depth of empathy only those bonded by shared lives could convey. "You've got to start somewhere, Carter, facing what you've learned. Isn't that a part of being a good cop? Hell, a decent human being?" Her words struck a chord within him, resonating like the gentle pluck of strings tuned to compassion's frequency. Her perspective inspired not condemnation for past deeds, but encouragement to guide steps toward a different future, one rooted in understanding and growth. "I spoke with Henry Bolton today," Carter confessed after a stretch of silence, the admission itself a testament to the paradigm shift initiated by that discourse. Seeing him, hearing him, I realized how much I'd missed before, how much we all might have missed. "How'd it feel to talk with him?" Lena asked, genuinely invested in the arc of his transformation. "Groundbreaking," he admitted, the admission a cathartic release. "Felt like the first step, perhaps the most crucial, towards becoming the officer I thought I already was." The intricacies of complexity swayed gentle between them, each motive explored with clarity anew. Carter recognized that the road of accountability stretched unfurling over the horizon, challenging each crossroads, faced with the promise of a future painted not in singular shades, but vibrantly articulated by the colors of unity. "People are demanding more from us, from the badge, from those of us who wear it," Carter continued, emboldened now by Lena's unwavering support. "And I want to be the better cop they deserve, not just policing but truly protecting." Lena reached for his hand, grasping it with knowing assurance. "Then be that change. Engage with them. Talk, listen. Show them who you've chosen to become. We've all got to show growth, or we're standing still." Her words, bound with Carter's resolve, interlocking determination to objectivity, and as he considered the promise within them, he knew they echoed not just a personal revelation, but the call for departmental introspection, a wider reconsideration of principles holding officers accountable to societal legacies. In seeking guidance from peers who tackled similar introspective challenges, Carter saw potential, an ensemble of officers beginning to engage deeply with diversity initiatives, rooting their commitment in listening thoughtfully to the communities they patrolled. Seeing Lena's gaze, he recognized how pivotal her faith in him had been, her ability to ignite in him the capacity to see beyond flawed actions to the restoration of character. It required more than introspection. It required gentleness and daring to transform. "Thank you," Carter said, his voice low but sincere, capturing both the gravity of days past and the summoning of days yet to be carved from choices. As night dressed the sky in twilight's tapestry, Carter stood, infused by the promise of renewal. He and Lena stepped out into the cool, comforting breeze, leaning against the porch railing as stars began to punctuate the darkness above, each a testament to history, guided by the past, yet illuminating what lay ahead. Together they looked beyond, their shared musings a silent vow to nurture paths towards justice, ensuring each endeavor bore the handprint of humanity renowned. Where are you beginning your journey to make a difference? And what truths will guide your steps toward transformation? Join our dialogue as we learn and grow together. The solid oak doors of the community center opened to a room brimming with anticipation, a congregation of hopeful souls eager to hear from Henry Bolton himself. Within these walls, a crowd sat quietly, waiting for an address that promised not just reflections on a journey past, but a visionary glimpse towards a more equitable future. Henry stood at the periphery, dappled in the soft light filtering through sunlit beams, his breath steadying as he drew confidence from memories of the march, the meeting, profound conversations. He felt the weight of their expectations and knew this wasn't merely a speech, it was a declaration, a bold reaffirmation of the community's collective endeavor. André stood by his father, a sentinel of solidarity, feeling the considerable weight of the moment through the shared bonds of kinship and crusade. The assembled crowd reflected a tapestry of diversity, faces radiating a spectrum of backgrounds and experiences united in their shared pursuit of justice. The young and elderly side by side, activists and allies intermixed, each threading their own stories into the fabric Henry was about to address. As Henry moved to the stage, the room hushed, anticipation palpable in the stillness. He paused, catching sight of familiar faces, individuals who had grown alongside him, whose support had illuminated paths during arduous times. With a nod to André, Henry began, his voice a sonorous melody of conviction echoing through the assembly. "Thank you all for being here," he started, the sincerity in his words as powerful as the history sewn into them. "This isn't just my story to tell, it's ours, a narrative woven from the threads of struggle and survival, sewn with the hands of those who stood defiantly through adversity." His gaze swept across the room, meeting eyes brimming with shared intent, allowing the moments before his words to anchor him. These were the people standing on the precipice of possibility, dedicated to not just listening, but acting upon the change implicit within his message. "Injustice touched our streets, but our reaction gave it wings," Henry continued, reflecting on the essence of transformative unity each individual contributed. "I am grateful to stand among you, grateful to know our barns, schools, and bridges glisten brighter because we demand they do so. This struggle is a testament to courage, the belief that we can and will dismantle barriers and build respectful connection." Emotion bubbled under his words, filling spaces between sentences with the unspoken depth of millions who marched before, their legacy settled upon shoulders in perpetual tension with reservation and hope. Henry paused, drawing in the ensemble of truths filling the air, signatures of allies and activists harmonizing in their silent chorus for equality. He sensed each person offering both a part of themselves and receiving more than could ever be extracted through petition alone. "Change doesn't come easy, nor is it quickly won," Henry affirmed, words deliberate, each syllable carrying the gravity each moment incurred. "But that march we took, those steps, defined by the messages we shared, and will continue to define futures ahead," his words sank like an anchor into the room, steady, immovable, faces lifted with recognition, realization articulating the momentum shrouded within individual dedications, and the joint declaration of purpose forged together. "Each of you who dares to hope and envision allows us to move hearts, stirring dormant dreams into action, courage into reality," Henry continued, his determination echoing among the crowd. "Our community has waited long enough, and now it's time to walk the walk we started. Whether in dialogue or defiance, your voice matters, your actions essential." André, standing nearby, beamed with pride and conviction, grateful for the convergence of circumstance and vision that had widened the avenue for justice. He knew his father's words, their meaning, would extend far beyond this room, spiraling into the ethos guiding generations forward. Henry concluded with the solemnity of commitment etched into every line of his face, echoes reverberating through upturned minds and swelling hearts. "Together we can compose a legacy for justice that resonates not just here but beyond," reaching those yearning for equity and respect. Thunderous applause surged, not just clutching the seams of the moment, but tearing through them. The response, a living, breathing testament to his words, shook the room, community members rising as one to applaud not just Henry's journey, but their own shared potential. With each clap, they cast stones into still waters, ripples spreading outward to carry the message of justice and equity wherever they reached. As the applause faded to whispers on the air, the people of Oak Avenue knew their connection to this dialogue was unbreakable, held firm by the realization that together they could achieve extraordinary feats. As Henry stepped off the stage, hugged by waves of gratitude and renewed energy, he realized this address was but a new beginning, a foundation grounded in action promised, roots grounded in shared humanity. What story can you share? A spark of resilience to help guide our movement toward justice and equality. Join our dialogue and let your voice resonate as one with ours. The glow of accomplishment and shared commitment lingered as the crowd trickled out of the community center. Pockets of conversations continuing to ignite with hope and purpose. Henry and Andre stood near the exit, exchanging words with neighbors, grateful for the ties renewed and strengthened in unity. As the evening folded into itself, the Boltons returned to their home, a repository of warmth and cherished memories. Yet amidst the certainty of change, an unspoken weight hung in the air, the gravity of their mission underscored by the potential strains upon their personal lives. In the quiet confines of their living room, Henry settled into his favorite armchair, the upholstery bearing the faint wear of cherished familiarity. Andre moved to the sofa, though his thoughts seemed to traverse the boundaries of their shared abode. Their dialogue, so often absorbed in broader societal aspirations, now drifted toward the complexities of their familial bond. "Dad, how are you holding up with all of this?" Andre's question, though gently posed, resonated with a depth of understanding that came from being an intrinsic part of their intertwined journey. Henry paused, considering. His heart beat its steady rhythm, familiar yet now more distinctly felt amidst the ebb and flow of ongoing repercussions. "I'm managing," he replied, the simple admission carrying layers of contemplation. "The noise from outside these walls is loud, but you being here, well, it means more than I can put into words." Their eyes met, bridging the gap between them, an exchange enriched by mutual respect, carefully cultivated. Andre's return had infused Henry's mission with a renewed vigor, yet the father-son dynamic had grown richer, more layered, as they explored the complexities of standing side by side in this fight. "You've always shown me what it means to hold the line, even when the world seemed indifferent," Andre responded, the sentiment digging into the roots of their shared history. "But I worry too. Sometimes I forget that we can also be vulnerable, especially to the demands being placed on us." Henry nodded, understanding weaving through Andre's words, a sentiment he reciprocated deeply. He recognized the duality of their situation. They were both rocks and crevices, shaped by the external and internal forces, dancing in harmony and discord alike. "We mustn't lose sight of ourselves in the fight," Henry admitted, the truth unwinding through years of careful reflection. "It's easy to charge ahead, forgetfulness immortally etched along paths already paved with efforts of those who came before, but we're only human." Silence enveloped them, the comforting balm that allowed thoughts to settle and truths to breathe. Outside, the soft hum of crickets serenaded the night, underscoring the perpetual rhythm of life, extending beyond their doorstep. Andre leaned back, his eyes drawing patterns in the ceiling, a canvas against which dreams and dilemmas danced in equal measure. "I know you've carried this burden for years," he said softly, turning his gaze back to Henry. "The legacy you've entrusted me with, it feels overwhelming at times." Henry reached out, grasping Andre's hand with paternal consolidation, instilling warmth into the connection bridging their moment of vulnerability. "You've taken it on beautifully, son," he reassured, the praise imbued with authenticity. "What we're building is bigger than both of us. It's a foundation laid with love and dedication, and it doesn't need to rest solely on your shoulders." Their words, as much a reciprocal affirmation as a dialogue, wove a stronger bond, a reminder for Andre that it was his human depth, not his capacity for endurance alone, that fueled this mission. Family, Andrew mused, feeling the word expand gently around them. Perhaps that's ultimately the legacy worth fighting for. Henry nodded, understanding the depth of meaning folded into the simple notion family, interwoven with each step taken, each voice amplified, their history and future a continuum of determined efforts. Every sacrifice made was rooted in the belief that communities were no more than extended families, bound by thread and shared humanity. As the evening deepened, Andre's mission was clear: to support the movement not just with strategy, but with the sincerity of a son honoring his father. The weight they bore together was transformed by the simple act of being present for each other, reflecting upon the journey undertaken with renewed appreciation for the path lying ahead. In the embrace of the night, Henry and Andre recommitted themselves, not just to the cause that had consumed them, but to each other. Their shared resolve was a bulwark against fatigue and fear, built upon the belief that love amplified their ability to effect change. As the tension ebbed and the night wore on, father and son remained engaged in vulnerable discourse, charting the course of their bond in a world that often sought to redefine them. Their words became a silent promise to carry forth with grace and resilience, rooted in the enduring strength of familial love. Within your family, what bonds do you nurture to support your journey toward change? Share your stories and contributions in the ongoing pursuit of justice. As dawn broke gently over the horizon, Henry Bolton awoke to the quiet murmurs of a world still sleeping, the morning light filtering through sheer curtains and casting a soft luminescence over his room. Today, the usual silence of the early hour was disrupted by the insistent hum of his phone vibrating ceaselessly on the bedside table. Henry reached for the device, his fingers brushing across the screen to reveal a glowing stream of notifications, messages from friends, allies, and an unexpected deluge of social media interactions that spoke volumes to the digital tempest brewing beyond Oak Avenue. He took a moment to absorb the enormity of it. The sheer volume mirrored not only interest but investment from those beyond their small town, from communities grappling with mirrored battles. Across social media platforms, hashtags like Justice for Henry and Change for Communities surged in prominence. Communities galvanized by the Bolton narrative, weaving their own stories into this shared digital tapestry. Each story, each comment was a connection, a digital thread linking individual lives into a collective drive for justice. Henry knew this digital awakening was a conduit for awareness, a channel by which narratives of equity and reform could bend into global conversations. His story was no longer just his own. It had ignited a worldwide reckoning through pixels and screens, through posts and shares, as people found resonance in his resilient march toward change. Downstairs, Andre was already at work, his face lit by the glow of his laptop screen, where various tabs clattered with active conversations. The sound of cause-energy constructive discord, as online forums buzzed with debates over policy and prejudice, resonated through digital airwaves. "Morning, Dad," Andre greeted, looking up from his screen when Henry entered the kitchen. "It's been a busy morning already. The outpouring online is incredible. People everywhere are taking up the cause." Henry nodded, pouring himself a cup of coffee as he glanced at the screen filled with comments and shared experiences that filled the digital space with humanity's reach. It was a cavalcade of individuals united in purpose, each voice amplifying the urgent call for transformation in varied shades and timbres. Together, father and son navigated through the myriad of responses, each interaction amplifying the reach of Henry's story and threading its implications through the fabric of worldwide discussions. They read the testimonials of those inspired by Henry's courage, a symphony of activism rising from both the celebrated and the sorrowful, all emboldened to lend momentum to the evolving dialogue. There were messages from veterans who saw in Henry a reflection of their own battles for recognition and dignity, voices uplifted by the echoes of respect and validation his journey heralded. Mothers penned heartfelt letters, thanking Henry for forging a future less fraught with fear for their own sons and daughters. Young activists, ignited by hope, pledged their commitment to furthering their localized missions. Andre managed the deluge with practiced efficiency, acknowledging the influx and orchestrating their responses across the platforms. "There's a momentum here," Andre noted, his eyes tracking the interactions scrolling rapidly by. "We've helped open doors to conversations about reform. Now we need to harness this for tangible action." Henry agreed, recognizing the potential of their reach beyond mere discourse. "These voices bring urgency, Andre. We need to create links between the digital dialogues and local movements, tying those experiences to policy changes that resonate within communities." Together, they devised a plan to utilize their newfound influence to guide and elevate existing initiatives. By connecting people through digital town halls, they aimed to foster cohesion among diverse groups across states and oceans, a web of connectivity underpinning barriers dissolved by courage. Their efforts did not go unnoticed as media outlets reached out for interviews and segments, eager to explore the deeper currents of engagement rippling from Henry's story. Each interaction, woven from chats and threads, became a foundation upon which alliances were crafted. And through these, the community grew, bound by empathy and resilience. When the day gave way to dusk, Henry and Andre prepared to host their first virtual panel, with community leaders and activists joining from locations as varied as the challenges they encountered. The air recalled tranquility, harboring the excitation of anticipation. A mosaic of faces filled the screen, some known, others familiar only through stories shared across the digital divide. As dialogue unfurled, Henry realized the power inherent in their convergence, not merely stories collected, but lives interwoven, bolstered by shared intent. Through dynamic conversations about systemic reform and communal accountability, the participants laid the groundwork for coalitions poised to effect lasting change. The pivoting dynamics revealed opportunities across a breadth of industries and sectors, everything from policing to education reform. And as the link transpired between participants, the network of solidarity expanded, ideas exchanged, resolutions aligned, and partnerships forged over the highway of cyberspace in pursuit of shared objectives. As their conversations wound down, Henry acknowledged the palpable connection forged beneath glowing monitors, recognizing both the immense potential and the formidable challenges looming along their path. Each participant carried away ballast from the exchange, grounded in newfound purpose, yet buoyed by shared strength. "Just look at what we can do, Dad," Andre remarked, the weight of their impact tracing a smile across his face. "Together, we're proving the power of our voices to catalyze change, no matter how far apart we might be." Henry, absorbing the full breadth of their accomplishment, replied with a certainty underpinned by years of yearning. "We've rallied their hopes, shaped dreams into realities. Now we keep pushing, ensuring these bridges remain accessible for every voice to find its path." Where do you see your place in the digital conversation for justice? Let your voice add to the collective dialogue moving us forward. The rhythms of daily life in Oak Avenue resumed amidst whispers of change, a change that had made its residency felt in the calligraphic stories shared by its people over the last few weeks. Yet the resounding echoes of Henry Bolton's journey continued to pulse just beneath the surface, woven intricately into the fabric of the town's narrative, binding its beings into a cohesive current. On this particular morning, the birds sang a brighter song, as if heralding new beginnings. Henry stood at the window observing the scenery, drenched in morning light. Every shadow and slant of light reminded him that While yesterday was behind them, today's promises still awaited fulfillment. The ring of the doorbell jarred Henry from his reverie. He opened the door to find Olivia Carmichael, the intrepid journalist whose coverage had helped transition their local narrative into a widespread movement, standing on the threshold with a smile both eager and kind. "Henry, I didn't mean to catch you this early," Olivia apologized with warmth that belied her professionalism. "I have some updates regarding your story's ripple effect, and I thought it better to share in person." "Come on in, Olivia," Henry said, welcoming her into the cozy embrace of his home. The experiences gathered within these walls hung in the air like a tapestry of triumph and tenacity. As they settled into the living room, Olivia wasted no time in detailing the surge of momentum generated by the shared accounts and experiences highlighted within her article segments. She described the breadth of engagement and optimism inspired nationally, a beacon that shone with the promise of continuing change. "The response has been overwhelming," Olivia noted, her notebook cradled in her hand the same way a bard carries tales. "People are reaching out, not just for interviews, but with plans to support the movement. They want to know how they can contribute to the push for equitable reforms." Henry listened intently, buoyed by the reconfirmation of his story's impact, but moreover reflecting on the resilience imbued within those who had bridged across barriers to join and strengthen the fight. "You've inspired them, Henry," Olivier continued, her tone a mixture of admiration and determination to help piece the unfolding puzzle into a united front. "It's more than just your story. It's the catalyst for something profound, already touching corners of the country we hadn't considered." Andre joined them then, drawn by the conversation ringing with truths he was intimately connected to. The spark in Olivia's voice conveyed her belief in the potential of every cause ignited by their tale. "I've been thinking about how we can capitalize on this energy," Andrew said, handing a fresh cup of coffee to Olivia. "Perhaps there's a way to channel this growing network into tangible footprints of change in communities nationwide, beyond just forums and panel talks." Henry nodded in agreement, envisioning the mosaic of actions commingling as a symphony of change, each note playing a part in composing a larger score of equality and justice. "We should consider reaching out to civically engaged organizations, offering what we've learned to inspire grassroots initiatives elsewhere," Henry suggested, his voice anchored in seasoned pragmatism. "Transform this into a guide to help others implement these changes locally." Olivia's eyes gleamed with approval at the idea, already composing strands of connection and potential articles highlighting such endeavors. As a storyteller, guiding change was more than capturing moments. It was about ensuring those moments bloomed beyond her pages. As their dialogue deepened into strategy mapping connections between changing communities and persistent advocacy, Olivia shared news of an incoming event poised to punctuate their efforts with a powerful exclamation. A conference centered around justice and reform, bringing together thought leaders, advocates, and changemakers, she announced. "They're reaching out because of your influence, Henry, and they want your voice at their forum." The invitation represented more than just recognition. It was an opportunity to link what was instigated locally to broader momentum, to stand upon a dais not simply as a storyteller in his own right, but as a vanguard of the stories yet to be written across varied geographies. "I'm honored," Henry replied, grappling with the magnitude of what such an opportunity entailed. He felt the weight of pledging presence, both as an emblem of hope and a participant shaping uncharted directions. In the excitement of their planning, Henry appreciated Olivia's presence, acknowledging her dedication to conveying narratives with authenticity, crafting echoes into substance. Together, their ideas sculpted pathways beyond inherent hurdles to resonate with communities in need of encouragement and actionable insight. As they concluded their meeting, Henry saw reflected in Olivia's eyes the same determination he found every morning when grappling within this arena. It wasn't merely the spark of life's temporary triumphs, but the enduring legacy strived for through perseverance and belief. As she left, Henry and Andre remained in embrace, with this symbiotic partnership founded upon shared mission. They knew that with stories powered by ideation reached through supportive hands, tomorrow sparkled with the potential of transformation sought beneath unwavering stars. What role do you see storytelling playing in driving societal change? Share your narrative here and let us connect through our collective impact. The brisk air of a late autumn morning greeted Henry as he stepped outside, the streets of Oak Avenue alive with the usual routine of daily life now laced with an undercurrent of change. Each person, each vehicle moving with purpose, seemed to carry a shared intent, a burgeoning momentum that Henry felt in the very fiber of his being. As Henry walked along the now familiar route to the town square, he was joined by Andre, whose presence added strength and continuity to their shared path. Today was particularly significant. The police department, newly pressured into introspection by community demands and internal dedication to reform, had invited Henry and Andre to a roundtable discussion aimed at bridging divides and fostering understanding. This meeting bore the semblance of necessity not just in shaping new policies, but in healing festering wounds. It offered a chance for the department and its individuals to transform promises into actions, layering intent with the weight of accountability, a chance to sculpt a narrative collectively authored. At the station, a palpable sense of anticipation permeated the building, a feeling both of apprehension and of hopeful anticipation, as officers gathered to participate in the unprecedented exchange. The room, designed for formal meetings, today became a sanctuary of engagement, a space committed to listening and responding. Lieutenant Davis, who from the beginning had championed the cause of reform, welcomed Henry and Andre with a nod that encapsulated gratitude and an earnest willingness to guide the ship of cultural evolution into safer harbors. "Mr. Bolton, General Bolton," Davis began, addressing them in front of selected officers and community representatives gathered around the table. "Thank you for coming today. We see this as the formative step in redefining not just our department, but our role within the community." Henry looked around, noting the diversity of rank and experience gathered there. Not merely a collection of badges, but of guardians, attentive to the undercurrents that traditionally shaped their profession and community. "It's our commitment to be here," Henry responded, his demeanor carrying the full breadth of lived wisdom tempered by patience. "Together, through dialogue, we can learn and implement changes that will echo beyond immediate reforms." Andre followed, his voice resonant with a clear echo reminiscent of military authority, yet softened by the values instilled through compassion and experience. "We're here to foster a space where vulnerability isn't seen as weakness, but as a genuine path to understanding and growth." The session commenced with candid stories, officers sharing moments of uncertainty, of not knowing how best to address community needs, and the gap between protective ideals and their execution. It was an admission, raw and heartfelt, acknowledging the shared humanity in the pursuit of peace and progress. Henry and other community stakeholders present responded with equal candor, stories of exclusion that tarnished trust, fear born from misunderstanding, and aspirations for a future where collaboration took precedence over reputation. In this shared space, amidst the humility of learning and willingness to listen, personal stories intertwined with broader narratives. It revealed an unspoken alliance forming within that sacred space, a collective momentum intent on bending historic arcs toward justice. Across the table, Carter, imbued with a new outlook forged through personal revelation, spoke openly about his former misconceptions and pledges to engage meaningfully. His words were met with measured acknowledgement, a bid for authentic efforts in cultivating trust anew. "It requires us all," Carter said, his voice edged with earnestness, "to lean into this with more than intention, with actions that cement our commitment to the trust of those we serve." The conversation bore fruit as solutions emerged. Practices ensuring diverse voices in departmental policies, advocacy roles bridging officer and community needs, and establishing transparent mechanisms to give voice to grievances without fear of reprisal. Henry and Andre felt the collective seeds of potential take root, an authentic reclamation rendering visible the impactful alliance they knew could bloom into systemic transformation. Each commitment pledged was a promise unwritten, realized when officers and residents walked paths forged together. As the session concluded, meetings previously convened with routine formality dissolved into exchanges purposeful and engaged, an array of people jointly striving to transform aspiration into tangible progress. As Henry and Andre departed, their faith in the forthcoming journey fortified by the sincerity of shared mission, they knew this was only the beginning of a relationship united by mutual endeavor, a journey motivating sustainable justice through that which unites rather than divides. What steps toward understanding and collaboration do you envision in your community, and how will they shape the future? Share your vision and join in cultivating collective growth. The peaceful hum of Oak Avenue persisted into the evening, casting a serene glow that flickered warmly through the quiet streets. In contrast to the tranquility, a series of private discussions unfolded behind closed doors, strategic conversations aimed at transforming the fervent energy sparked by recent events into a scaffold for lasting reform. It was a charged atmosphere, filled with hope, expectation, and the weight of responsibility. Henry and Andre Bolton had returned home with a satchel brimming with notes, proposals, and recollections from the day's dialogues. The intent was clear: to consolidate these insights into actionable policies that could sustain the momentum and ensure true transformation. It was not recreation they sought now, but resolution. As they settled into their living room, their minds absorbed in the strategy of change, Lennox Reed, an old military friend of Andre's, entered through the front door. Lennox had flown across the country not only to lend his support, but to offer expertise in orchestrating the next steps. That required meticulous planning and steadfast resolve. "Henry, Andre," Lennox greeted, his voice imbued with camaraderie and resolve. "I've been following your story closely, and let me just say, the engagement you've garnered, it's an incredible catalyst." Andre clasped hands with Lennox, noting the steady strength of the man standing before him, whose own journey reflected formidable courage and determination. "Thanks for coming, Lennox. We could use your insight in making this work sustainable and far-reaching." They gathered around the dining table, adorned with charts, drafts, and the occasional steaming mug, their organized effort reminding them their fight was anchored in both heart and strategy, drawing inspiration and guidance from battles both historical and personal. The dialogue began with Henry setting objectives. "We need to redirect this momentum into long-term impact. Tonight, let's focus on 3 key aspects: enhancing community oversight, fostering education-based initiatives on equity, and establishing ongoing dialogues with law enforcement." Lennox nodded, drawing from his own experiences in military reform and human-centric policy development. "Count me in. We can look into adaptable models from the military, systems enabling accountability without sacrificing cohesion." Andre gestured toward the map of the town, pins marking potential points of outreach. "By ensuring the community is actively involved in oversight roles, we create a transparency loop that continually fosters trust." They discussed the potential for a community advisory board, drawing members from diverse sectors, educators, civil leaders, and even youth representatives, bringing as many voices to the table as possible without overwhelming the dialogue. "Amplifying education initiatives is crucial," Lennox added, tracing through proposals with a critical eye experienced in policy development. "If we educate at grassroots levels, we inspire comprehension from the ground up, paving the way for generational understanding." They considered implementing workshops and seminars focused on diversity, with local high schools and community colleges offering supplementary courses that promoted cross-cultural respect and understanding. Each idea was layered with both practicability and thoughtfulness, paving the way for depthful integration into community ethos. Finally, Andre emphasized, establish ongoing dialogues with the police department to nurture mutual respect. We need regular forums to discuss progress and address concerns. Henry agreed, remembering the sincere conversations at the precinct earlier that day, a platform fostering honest discussions woven with vulnerability and resolve. The strength of those conversations echoed here now, fueling their determination as they constructed comprehensive frameworks to guide the future of community police relations. As the night deepened and the room filled with the soft rustling of notes and strategic brainstorming, they found validation in unity, a trinity of voices navigating historic challenges through the blueprint of togetherness. Lennox's presence, his compassion and pragmatic insights, added to their resources, bolstered by the unspoken acknowledgement of shared purpose and a willingness to propel each idea into eventual action. By dawn, plans were sketched, riddled with the essence of dedication, equity, and sustainable effort. The captivating blend of humanity and strategy articulated across the pages now became both compass and guidepost, illuminating the path of purpose, undeterred by shadows past. As they concluded, they realized that more than just ideas had been born here tonight. Connections, alliances, and resolutions confirmed a vital truth, the realization that the bridges they fortified were not merely structures forged from necessity, but from a genuine resolve to carry the collective forward. Together, they vowed to harness the strength in numbers, navigating from aspiration to reality, ensuring every voice, no matter how small or distant, would resonate through the corridors of power, stitched and sustained by the tenacious spirit of justice. What comprehensive strategies can you envision that tie communities, governance, and justice into cohesive progress? Let's engage in building our shared future. The early afternoon light spilled into the town hall, casting a warm glow over the assembly gathered in its venerable chamber. Today, Oak Avenue was poised on the precipice of acknowledgement, a defining moment that promised not just words, but genuine reconciliation. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as community members, journalists, and local leaders arrived to witness a historic gesture from the police department. The dais was set with precision, microphones lined up at attention, ready to carry the weight of words long overdue. Henry Bolton sat among the dignitaries, his presence a pillar of integrity around which this meeting pivoted. He was not alone. Andre was seated beside him, both figures representing relentless dedication to justice. As the room filled, conversations reverberated in hushed tones, a testament to the promise held within shared aspirations. The buzz was punctuated by the arrival of the chief of police, a man determined to steer the department into the forthcoming light of transparency and reform. Chief Lanier's journey had been fraught with introspection and unlearning, a path paved by dialogues initiated by his own reckoning. The hall quieted as he stepped up to the podium, a commanding presence framed by the emblems of service that spanned the walls behind him. His stature bespoke authority, but today his words needed something more profound, empathy and sincere engagement to traverse the gaps left by historic inaction. Ladies and gentlemen, community of Oak Avenue, Chief Lanier began, his voice steady yet carrying the timbre of conscience. Today, we gather not only to acknowledge the grievances of the past, but to issue a heartfelt apology and commit to the journey of reform driven by your courage. His declaration resonated throughout the room, a current drawn from the heart of those present, amplifying resolve through collective breaths held in anticipation. In recent months, guided by pioneers such as Henry Bolton and many unsung heroes, Lanier continued, we've embarked on a process of transformation, looking inward to better serve outward. I stand here embracing the values of humility and unity. His words were carefully chosen, reinforcing the need for substantive trials to heal and fortify ties with the community. The crowd listened intently, some nodding gently, others reflecting quietly upon the magnitude of this moment. It was, they knew, a pivot towards change, a reckoning so profoundly needed for true reconnection. As Lanier presented the reforms laid bare, initiatives ratified through earnest discourse with stakeholders, he stopped periodically to acknowledge the profound commitment displayed by officers and citizens alike. Incentives included the establishment of the Community Advisory Board, diversity education initiatives, and continuous open forums to ensure transparent dialogue moving forward. Henry felt the assurances wash over him, like a sealant over cracks long left to fester. Each promise served as a balm, an acknowledgement of pain, but also a testament to the resilience of community and individual spirit. "I have learned," Lanier concluded, his speech wrapping itself in humility, that our strength lies in our vulnerability to change, to embrace equity, and advance responsibly with the community as our guide. Today, we choose to walk this path together." The silence that followed was profound, not one of disbelief, but rather a collective pause to absorb the act of unity unfolding before them. Applause erupted, a symphony of heartfelt support that rose through the rafters. That applause was more than recognition. It was an ovation of belief in a future sculpted collaboratively. As the sound receded, Chief Lanier beckoned Henry to the podium, a symbolic handover, acknowledging Michael's invaluable role in igniting this transformative narrative. Henry approached, his gait measured but with the vigor of purpose and promise firmly etched within each step. Taking his place, he gazed across the sea of expectant faces and felt within the comedy of empathy, a torch passed, and now bright in hands eager to illuminate the way forward. "It's said that in every story lies power," Henry began, his voice gentle yet resonant with conviction delivered plainly. "And every one of you here has made this story remarkable by reshaping its ending." He paused, his words settling over the assembly like a benediction of fervent dreams. "With our continued marching and trust in community, let's elect to let no crack go unsealed, no bridge unexplored. By standing together, we will bend the arcs of our narrative toward justice that endures." A chorus of agreement rippled through the hall, an affirmation that the shared continuum of struggle and triumph had found its voice in the daily lives of those gathered. As Andre joined him on the dais, the moment's import settled over them. The baton they now shared was not heavy with burden, but buoyant with possibilities promised by the shared journey they traveled, a journey that extended beyond boundaries, yet intimately bound by unity. As Henry rejoined his seat amid celebrated camaraderie, he understood the echoes of this gathering would reverberate far beyond these walls, within the everyday lives of those who invested compassion and courage into the relentless march of progress. Leaving the hall, their faces lit with expectation, the town of Oak Avenue exited, cognizant that they carried home not just commitments aplenty, but a shared counsel of hope, renewed in freedom and purpose, unyielding. What commitments do you perceive are necessary in your community for forging the bridges toward collective understanding and justice? Share your vision and help shape our continuing dialogue. As dusk settled gently over Oak Avenue, painting the sky with hues of lavender and deep blue, the echoes of the day's momentous actions lingered in the hearts of its residents. The community, once fragmented by silent grievances and unseen divides, was knitting itself back together, a testament to what could be achieved when voices merged into a harmonious chorus. Henry Bolton sat on his porch, the worn boards creaking beneath the weight of reflection. Nearby, wind chimes sang softly, weaving a tranquil melody that underscored the changes that had swept through his world. He gazed out at the familiar street, each house now a sentinel of change, each neighbor an ally. Andre joined him, bending under the porch light that cast a soft glow over them both. They didn't need words to acknowledge the completion of a chapter, an unvoiced understanding that their efforts had borne fruit before giving way to the next season of endeavor. The work was far from over, Henry knew, but for now, there was satisfaction in having been part of something greater than himself and knowing the baton had been passed to many capable hands. The bonds forged would continue to fortify the community, creating a legacy of inclusion and mutual respect. "Dad," Andre said softly, the evening calm wrapping them in its embrace. It feels like the beginning, doesn't it? Like everything we've worked for is laying the groundwork for what comes next. Henry nodded, his gaze far-reaching, seeing not just the Oak Avenue of today, but the possibilities stretching into the horizon, a future colored by collaboration and dignity. Indeed, Andre, every conversation, every step, they've laid a foundation we can all build upon. They sat together in companionable silence, absorbed in the tranquility of the moment, knowing the power of ripples begun and the waves yet to crash upon distant shores. Though visible work awaited them, lessons to impart, dialogues to engage, it was their place within this narrative of justice and equality that burned brightly in their collective consciousness. Inside, the fire crackled warmly in the hearth, luminescence spilling into the room where family photographs were displayed, vivid reminders of the connections that spanned generations. Henry thought of Jacqueline with fondness, her spirit and indomitable resilience guiding him still, her presence felt undiminished, woven through the fabric of their lives. As the sky darkened, the town settled deeper into the embrace of night, caressed by a renewed spirit. Today had shown Henry the luminous glow emanating from shared victories, the clear, resolute flame of community undertakings forged in the crucible of unity. Around Oak Avenue, lights blinked out, one by one. Stars mirrored on earth as each household found peace in the momentum they had helped create. Their legacy would be illuminated, not just by the days they labored, but by evenings spent in quiet reflection and whispers of hope, igniting a persistent flame. As Henry's gaze lingered on the heavens, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for those who had conspired to elevate voices long silenced, and for the generations that would walk this path toward an unseen horizon. An image of his departed allies and ancestors, with Jacqueline among them, alighted his thoughts and heart with their ongoing encouragement. And as the infinite canvas of sky embraced another day's end, dreams unfurled amidst the constellations, a patchwork of progress, tied with shared purpose, threaded with aspirations, signed by courage, and carried by the myriad lives and stories who dared challenge complacency. Whispering to himself as hope reigned in the night, Henry couldn't help but marvel at the resilience of spirit spread across his community. It was a symbiotic dance of past and present, illuminated by conviction, faith undeniable and shared. In his heart, Henry held the simple, powerful truth that began and concluded this story, one that resonated through the quiet evening air. Together, we matter. Will you choose to matter tomorrow and add your voice to the chorus calling for unity? We invite you to join us, share your vision, and strengthen this collective journey forward, one story at a time.